Chapter 984, Heartless Swordsman. Chapter 984. Heartless Swordsman. Thump. Qin Pianran fell heavily to the ground, aggravating her injuries. Her tendons and bones felt like they were about to fall apart. However, it was as though she did not feel anything and was already numb. How could the pain on her body compare to the pain in her heart? She was still trying her best to support her upper body. Her beautiful eyes did not blink as she stared blankly at the disappearing sword beam in the distance. There was a look of indignance, disappointment, pain and struggle in her eyes. In the end, all her emotions vanished and she had a blank expression on her face. The luster in her beautiful eyes dimmed gradually and turned listless. When he saw that, Su Zimo sighed internally. The truly heartless one was not the Asura, but Tao Lord Immortal Sword who had fled. Including the battle back in 100 Refinement Sect, Qin Pianran had saved Tao Lord Immortal Sword twice. Even without their many years of relationship as fellow disciples, even if Tao Lord Immortal Sword had no feelings for Qin Pianran, the 2 times she saved his life should have been enough for him to stop in his tracks and save her regardless of the consequences. However, Tao Lord Immortal Sword did not do that. All he left for Qin Pianran was a cold sword beam and an icy back view. The irony was that the Asura was someone of the Fiend sex while Tao Lord Immortal Sword was someone of the Immortal sections. Who was the Immortal and who was the Fiend? When Yen Beichen's slash did not manage to cut down Tao Lord Immortal Sword, he wanted to give chase but stopped after taking a few steps. The sword escape technique was already circulated to its limits. Given his movement technique, it was almost impossible for him to catch up. At the same time on the other side of the battlefield, the Asura dermic body had already split the 3 heaven and earth dharma characteristics into 2 and was chasing relentlessly. Bang! 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 The ground quaked wherever the Asura dermic body passed. The Asura dermic body was more than 80 feet tall and it had huge strides. Within a few steps, it caught up to Monk Wen Kong. It swung down with the blood saber. Poof! Instantly, a shiny bald head flew up and the essence spirit within was smashed into nothingness by the Asura dermic body the moment it escaped. Monk Kong Wen was dead. Bang! Bang! The Asura dermic body took 2 more steps forward and caught up to another person, slashing down on its head. Tao Lord Fire Cloud summoned his Destiny dermic weapon and roared, wanting to defend. However, he was as insignificant as an ant in the face of the Asura dermic body that was more than 80 feet tall and filled with killing intent. His action was akin to a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Boom! Both sides collided with a loud bang. A terrifying power surged into Tao Lord Firecloud's body, causing his body to explode and his essence spirit to be destroyed on the spot. The Asura dermic body strode forward with a torrential blood chi and soon caught up to the last person. Heavenly Dipper Sex Tao Lord Breaking Skies. When Tao Lord Breaking Skies saw that he could no longer escape, he turned around and clashed head-on with the Asura dermic body. Bang! 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 Without their heaven and earth dharma characteristics, their dermic arts and blood chi could not defend against the killing power of the Asura dermic body. After a series of collisions, Tao Lord Breaking Skies was also covered in injuries and looked dispirited. His eyes were filled with endless indignance as he roared. Asura, why? Why are you killing us? Yen Beichen's expression was cold and he did not utter a single word. He could not be bothered at all. Before long, Tao Lord Breaking Skies was sliced into 2 by the Asura dermic body and died a tragic death. His physical body and essence spirit were both destroyed. It was only at this moment that a look of fatigue appeared on Yen Beichen's face. This battle consumed a lot of his physical and mental energy as well as dermic powers. After the battle, the Asura dermic body was riddled with holes as well. After retrieving the storage bags and some Destiny dermic weapons left behind by the Tao Lords, the Dharma characteristic gradually dissipated. Yen Beichen took out a handful of elixirs and stuffed them into his mouth. After regulating his breathing for a while, his expression softened and there was a tinge of redness on his face. Su Zimo revealed himself and walked over. Thank you, Senior. Su Zimo came before Yen Beichen and bowed deeply. Yen Beichen was not surprised to see Su Zimo. Given his cultivation, he had long sensed that someone was lurking nearby. It's fine. Yen Beichen patted Su Zimo on the shoulder and said indifferently, You came from Ethereal Peak as well. Since you don't have anyone to rely on in the Middle Continent, I can't let these Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords bully you. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he felt touched. Senior, your injuries. Su Zimo noticed that Yen Beichen seemed to have suffered significant injuries after fighting against the essence spirits of the 5 Dharma-characteristic Tao Lords. These are just minor injuries. It's nothing much. Yen Beichen waved it off and said casually, seemingly unconcerned. Pausing for a moment, Yen Beichen shifted his gaze and frowned when he caught sight of Qin Pianran, who was lying not far away. She heard our conversation. We can't let her live. With that said, Yen Beichen spun the Asura saber in his hands, wanting to kill Qin Pianran on the spot. There's no need. Su Zimo shook his head. I understand your efforts, Senior. This time round, news of Yen Beichen hunting down Tao Lord Immortal Sword and the others would spread through the entire cultivation world before long. The reason why he did not acknowledge Su Zimo in 100 Refinement Sect was because he did not want to implicate Su Zimo and cause trouble for the latter. The reason why he wanted to kill Qin Pianran was also because he wanted to silence her. Su Zimo said, Senior, I've already caused enough trouble. A few small matters won't really make a difference. Even without this incident, what will come will eventually come. Yen Beichen shook his head. Right now, you're the disciple of extreme fire while I'm the Asura of the fiend sections. Immortals and fiends cannot coexist. Furthermore, I have many enemies. It's not good for you if you get too close to me. Ha 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 ha. When he heard that, Su Zimo laughed instead and shouted, Senior, I'm now known as a fiend demon by the world. What's there to be afraid of if I'm close to someone from the fiend sex? Su Zimo was filled with pride. Senior, I'll remember your help today. Let alone the fact that you have many enemies. Even if you make the entire world your enemy one day, I'm willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. That statement was extremely bold, and even Yen Beichen was moved and invigorated when he heard it. All right. Yen Beichen was also an unruly and carefree person. Since that's the case, there's no need for you to address me as Senior. What I hate the most are nonsensical formalities and rules. I'm only slightly older than you. In the future, we can just address each other as brothers. Su Zimo's blood surged and he wanted to agree right away. However, he hesitated and said, My cultivation is too low. Throughout history, there was no lack of cultivators in the cultivation world who became bosom buddies. However, the difference in cultivation between these cultivators would not be too great. For example, in Yen Beichen and Su Zimo's case, one was a nascent soul while the other was a Dharma characteristic. Yen Beichen was more than enough to be Su Zimo's master. It was truly unprecedented for the two of them to address one another as brothers. Humph. Yen Beichen was a little displeased. Brother Su, what are you saying? I'm never someone who takes into account another person's cultivation if I want to take them as brothers. Even if you're immortal, it wouldn't matter. What more a nascent soul? Without any further hesitation, Su Zimo cupped his fists and smiled. Brother Yen. Brother Su. Yen Beichen said with a hint of warmth in his cold eyes. The two of them exchanged glances and smiled. Chapter 985. Amorous Asura. Chapter 985. Amorous Asura. Fu. Qin Pianran laid on the ground with dust all over her body. Her face was pale and her eyes were blank. With an indifferent expression, she suddenly laughed. Su Zimo and Yen Beichen looked over. A look of mockery flashed through Qin Pianran's eyes as she remarked mockingly, A fiend demon that kills without batting an eye and a cold-blooded and merciless fiend. To think that you guys would be calling each other brothers here. What a perfect match. Su Zimo shook his head and chuckled. He could not be bothered. Unexpectedly, Yen Beichen did not kill her with a single slash and merely said indifferently, Brother Su, let's go. This person is already dead and is nothing more than a walking corpse. Su Zimo understood what Yen Beichen meant. Qin Pianran was a pitiful person as well. Although she was still alive, she was devastated after receiving such a blow. She looked no different from a dead person. Su Zimo and Yen Beichen had just turned around and were about to leave when Qin Pianran suddenly turned a little crazy. Supporting her body with both arms, she dragged herself through the mud and shouted at the top of her lungs. You're an Asura and you're bloodthirsty. Why don't you kill me? Kill me. Yen Beichen did not even turn around as he smirked with a hint of mockery. As the Asura, I kill everyone in the world that deserves to be killed. Some people are unscrupulous in order to survive and deserve to be killed. However, there are some people who want nothing more than to die, and yet, I refuse to kill them. Su Zimo sighed softly. It wasn't just the Asura, he could feel it as well. Right from Qin Pianran's initial scoff, Su Zimo knew that she was seeking death. She provoked them time and time again with disrespectful words. Even someone from the immortal sex would be well substantiated to kill her. However, the Asura refused to do so. I got it. You don't dare to. Fufu, you're nothing but a coward. Suddenly, Qin Pianran burst into laughter. Her voice was already hoarse as she said, You must be afraid that senior brother Immortal Sword will seek revenge after you kill me, right? Yen Beichen turned around and looked at the pale-faced Qin Pianran who was covered in mud. He sneered, Stupid woman, do you really think that Immortal Sword will come seeking revenge for you? That must be the case. It's definitely the case. Initially, Yen Beichen was mocking her. However, Qin Pianran seemed to have found an answer as her initially dead eyes lit up. Su Zimo had a look of pity. Although Qin Pianran was infatuated with Tao Lord Immortal Sword, her devotion was heartbreaking. Time passed by quickly and one's youth was quickly spent. Be it the women of the mortal world or the female cultivators of the cultivation world, the greatest misfortunes in their lives were more often than not entrusting themselves to the wrong people. Qin Pianran shouted, I know. Senior brother Immortal Sword did not abandon me. He went to look for help and will definitely return. That's right, that must be it. Seemingly to confirm that thought, Qin Pianran clenched her fists tightly and murmured repeatedly. Yen Beichen looked at the woman who was on the brink of insanity before him, and sneered internally before turning to leave. However, just as he turned around, he seemed to have thought of something and stopped in his tracks. Since that's the case, I'll make you give up. Yen Beichen said coldly. I'll open up a cave abode nearby and stay here temporarily. I want to see if Immortal Sword dares to return. If he dares to, it'll be able to kill him conveniently as well. With that, Yen Beichen turned to Su Zimo and asked, If you don't have anything on, come along. I've got some cultivation insights to share with you. All right. Su Zimo nodded in agreement. This place was not far from 100 Refinement Sect. If anything were to happen, he would be able to rush to 100 Refinement Sect to send a message. Yen Beichen's gaze shifted and landed on a mountain peak not far away. Without a word, he waved his sleeves and swept up Qin Pianran who was on the ground, speeding towards the mountain peak. Su Zimo sent a spirit messenger crane to 100 Refinement Sect to inform Tao Lord Scarlet Star and the others that he was fine before chasing after Yen Beichen. The three of them arrived before the mountain peak very quickly. Yen Beichen waved his Asura saber and casually sliced the mountain peak a few times. As though he was cutting tofu, gigantic rocks fell one after another. Within moments, a simple cave abode was built. The three of them entered. The Asura casually tossed Qin Pianran to the side and sat down cross-D to heal himself without even looking at her. Su Zimo began setting up some simple formations at the entrance of the cave. The location of the cave abode was extremely good. Standing here, one had a clear vantage point and could see everything outside. If Tao Lord Immortal Sword were to return, they would definitely be able to notice him right away. For the next period of time, Yen Beichen would spend most of the day cultivating and recuperating. He would explain some of his cultivation insights to Su Zimo without holding back. Both of them were saber cultivators and Yen Beichen had even imparted the secret skill of the fiend sex to Su Zimoch. Back then, Su Zimo's cultivation realm was not high enough and there were some things that he could not understand. He did not manage to cultivate the Asura saber intent either. At that moment, many of his doubts were resolved with Yen Beichen's explanation and he felt enlightened. As time passed by, Yen Beichen's injuries recovered gradually. However, his face was still slightly pale. Every time Su Zimo asked, Yen Beichen would pass it off with a casual remark. For the past few days, Qin Pianran had been guarding the entrance of the cave, leaning against the wall and gazing into the distance with anticipation, unable to sleep. In fact, she did not even bother to heal herself. She was afraid that she might miss Tao Lord Immortal Sword's return while she was recuperating. Day after day passed by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 days were gone. Over the past few days, many cultivators had passed by this place. However, almost all of them were beneath the Dhamma characteristic realm. Even void reversions rarely appeared, let alone Tao Lord Immortal Sword. 10 days was enough for Tao Lord Immortal Sword to find help and make a comeback. After 10 days of sleepless nights, Qin Pianran looked exhausted and her face was yellow. However, she did not give up. Only with each passing day, the light in her eyes dimmed by a fraction. A month later, her eyes had turned lifeless. Su Zimo gazed at the woman before him and almost could not recognize her. This initially ravishing and heroic cultivator of Sword Sect was now covered in dirt all over her body with a yellowed complexion and disheveled hair. She could not even compare to the mortal female farmers in the fields, let alone cultivators with their otherworldly grace. For the past few days, she had not even washed or groomed herself. A woman would dress up for her lover. She had given up on that person. Therefore, she did not care about her appearance at all. What would it matter whether or not she was pretty or ugly? For the past month, Qin Pianran did not heal herself. Coupled with the fact that she did not sleep or rest, her injuries were aggravated and worsened. The wounds on her body were already rotting and reeking with a nauseating stench. However, she was oblivious to it and merely leaned against the entrance of the cave, gazing into the distance with lifeless eyes as the life force in her body gradually dissipated. There were no tears in her eyes. There was no greater sorrow than despair. Chapter 986. Di Yin's Acceptance. Chapter 986. Di Yin's Acceptance. Have you given up? For the first time in a month, Yen Beichen spoke to Qin Pianran in a seemingly cold and heartless manner. However, Su Zimo knew that Yen Beichen was saving her. If Yen Beichen was truly cold-blooded and heartless, he need not do anything himself. As long as he threw Qin Pianran aside and left her to fend for herself, she would definitely not be able to hold out for long. There was no need for him to spend so much effort to dig out a cave abode here and wait for a month. Qin Pianran had a blank expression and opened her mouth slightly, as though she wanted to say something. However, her throat was dry and she could only croak. Her lips were dry and chaffed. Even that slight movement caused her lips to split open and drip with blood. Qin Pianran pursed her lips and drank her blood. As though her throat had recovered a little, she murmured softly, "It's normal for him to not return since he doesn't know where I am." Su Zimo did not believe that reason. Even Qin Pianran herself might not believe it. That was because when she said that, there was no fluctuation or glint in her eyes. There was only a dead silence. If it was a month ago, Yen Beichen would have sneered and wanted to call her a stupid woman. However, at that moment, Yen Beichen did not smile and merely looked at Qin Pianran calmly. "I went out once 20 days ago and released the news that you were in my hand." Qin Pianran's heart ached. Her last bit of hope was shattered mercilessly by Yen Beichen's words. A month passed and no one came. Even after the Asura released news of her, no one came. Right then, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard from outside the cave abode as more than 10 cultivators sped into the distance and passed by them. Among the cultivators, 2 of them were void reversions. One was fat and the other skinny. Among the remaining cultivators, there were nascent souls and golden cores. The formation that Su Zimo set up at the entrance was rather mysterious and it was difficult for cultivators outside to discover the cave abode. However, the people inside could see everything on the outside clearly. Things have been really troublesome recently. One big event after another. The fat Dao being in the lead lamented, at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, that monster incarnate, Su Zimo, returned and massacred everyone. After that, the various Dao lords rushed to 100 Refinement Sect to demand for him. To think that Dao Lord Extreme Fire would come forth. That's an expert from 5,000 years ago. What happened after that? A cultivator asked curiously. The skinny Dao being said, all the Dao lords were snubbed and had no choice but to retreat. In the end, they bumped into a titular disciple of Asura sect, the Dao Lord Asura. Who is he? He's a cold-blooded, merciless and bloodthirsty fiend. It was a truly tragic battle. Why would the Asura look for Dao Lord Immortal Sword and the others? Who knows? The Asura is a lunatic and nobody knows what he's thinking. He might have just entered the Dharma characteristic realm and wanted to find someone to test his saber. I heard that the Asura has some relationship with Su Zimo. The reason why he hunted down Tao Lord Immortal Sword and the others was because of Su Zimo. The cultivators discussed excitedly. The skinny Tao being pursed his lips and his gaze shifted. He paused and pointed to a spot not far away. It said that the battle broke out there. How tragic. I heard that among Tao Lord Immortal Sword and the other 8 Tao Lords, only 2 survived. Which 2? Tao Lord Cloud Rain and Tao Lord Immortal Sword. Both of them are titular disciples. That's not right. Some time back, I heard that a Dharma characteristic Tao Lord of Sword sect, a female cultivator named Qin Pian Ran if I'm not wrong, survived and was captured by the Asura. A cultivator said in confusion. The skinny Tao being shook his head. How can she survive if she's captured by the Asura? Hee. Why not? The fat Tao being gave a strange laugh. That female cultivator must be pretty. Otherwise, why would the Asura capture her instead of killing her? I heard that the Asura wanted to force Tao Lord Immortal Sword to appear with that woman, but Tao Lord Immortal Sword ignored it completely, the skinny Tao being said. Definitely. If it was me, I wouldn't appear either. The fat Tao being said, who's willing to provoke that lunatic Asura because of a woman? Furthermore, if that woman fell into the hands of Asura, she would have long been ravished deplorably. There's even less reason for Tao Lord Immortal Sword to show himself for such a woman. Silence filled the cave abode when they heard the voices outside. Qin Pian Ran's body trembled slightly and her eyes were dark. Her sharp nails had already pierced through her palms and fresh blood flowed, but she was still oblivious to it. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted, unable to hold on any longer. To begin with, she was already severely injured and had not rested nor healed for the entire month. Her body and mind were already at their limits. Right now, she was merely hanging on by a thread, relying on a sliver of illusions. However, when she heard the discussions outside the cave abode, Qin Pian Ran's hopes were dashed and she fainted on the spot from the devastating blow. Although Yen Beichen was expressionless, there was a cold glint in his eyes. Suddenly, the temperature in the cave abode turned cold and sinister. Su Zimo knew that the group of cultivators outside had already triggered Yen Beichen's killing intent. Yen Beichen stood up slowly and walked out of the cave abode. Right then, the few cultivators outside changed the topic and discussed something else, causing Yen Beichen to stop in his tracks. Right, have you guys heard? Su Zimo declared war on Dean at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. A few days ago, Dean accepted the challenge. I heard that the time is a month later and the venue of the challenge will be at the Dao Inheritance Ground. However, I haven't heard Su Zimo's reply for the past few days. At that point, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and his eyes lit up. Dean accepted the challenge. Initially, he was worried that if Dean was fearful and ignored his declaration of war, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to kill the latter. Now that Dean had accepted the challenge, that was for the best. However, what was the Dao Inheritance Ground that the cultivators outside were talking about? It seemed like it was rather famous. Su Zimo had just arrived in the Middle Continent and did not know much about the various places in the Middle Continent, much less this Dao Inheritance Ground. At the side, Yen Beichen frowned instinctively when he heard the words Dao Inheritance Ground. Not only is Dean a monster incarnate, he's also a formidable character. That's right. That move of his is truly perfect. By placing the venue of the challenge at the Dao Inheritance Ground, Su Zimo's advantage is gone. Next, we'll have to see how Su Zimo reacts. What else can he do? He can only admit defeat. That's right. I heard that he has just cultivated the nascent soul realm and the difference between them is a major cultivation realm. If he enters the Dao Inheritance Ground, there's no chance of him winning against Dean and he'll definitely die. Fufu, he was the one that declared war. If he ends up avoiding the battle out of fear, his reputation will definitely take a huge blow. What else can he do? It's much better than going to the Dao Inheritance Ground to send himself to death, right? The more Su Zimo listened, the more confused he became. In the mouths of the cultivators outside, the Dao Inheritance Ground seemed like a lair of dragons and tigers. It was filled with danger. However, it did not seem like Dean would be affected much. The cultivators discussed and gradually left. Yen Beichen glanced sideways and seemed to have seen through Su Zimo's confusion. I'll be going out for a while. It'll be quick. I'll talk to you about this when I'm back. With that said, Yen Beichen left the cave abode in a flash. Chapter 987, Dao Inheritance Ground. Chapter 987, Dao Inheritance Ground. Not far away, a few tragic cries sounded briefly and everything returned to normal. Before long, Yen Beichen returned with a faint blood chi on him. He went straight to the point and asked, "How much do you know about the Dao Inheritance Ground?" "Nothing, I've never heard of it." Su Zimo shook his head. Yen Beichen said, "That's normal as well. Ethereal peak strength hasn't reached the level where they can come into contact with the Dao Inheritance Ground. As for you, I don't think anyone has mentioned it to you when you first arrived in Middle Continent and entered 100 Refinement Sect. The Dao Inheritance Ground is not somewhere in the Middle Continent. It's a space created by many ancient mighty figures." Su Zimo nodded. In the ancient era, the human race rose and countless paragons and monster incarnates appeared. However, there were not that many sects and factions. For some of the mighty figures who could not break through to the Mahayana realm or met with unforeseen circumstances, they would choose to pass down their Dharmic Dao inheritance and await for fated ones. Pausing for a moment, Yen Beichen asked, "Do you know why the titles of void reversions and Dharma characteristics possess the word Dao?" In the cultivation world, cultivators of every major cultivation realm had a title. For example, golden core cultivators were called perfected beings. Nascent soul cultivators were known as perfected lords. This was also a symbol of status. Most of the time, one might not be able to tell the other party's cultivation realm due to their capabilities. Or perhaps, it would be rude to check the other party's cultivation out of the blue. However, for example, if one found out that the title of a cultivator was perfected lord, they would know that the cultivator was at the nascent soul realm. Void reversions had the title of Dao beings. Dharma characteristics had the title of Dao lords. Su Zimo truly did not know why there was the word Dao in those two titles. When he saw Su Zimo shake his head, Yen Beichen continued, "That's because, generally speaking, one should have a clear Dao heart when they cultivate to this realm." Dao heart. Su Zimo was slightly stunned as he pondered. Yen Beichen's voice sounded once more. "There are millions of cultivators and their Dao hearts are different as well. Some of them are here to save the masses, some of them are here to kill demons, some of them are here to lead a carefree life, some of them are here to live a long life, some of them are here to become stronger and some of them are here for revenge. One has to maintain a clear Dao heart so that it isn't swayed by external objects, melted by flames, drowned by water, crushed by the skies, buried by the earth and is immovable as a mountain. That is the only way one can attain the great Dao." Dao hearts were the goal of cultivation. What was the purpose of cultivation? Cultivation was a heaven-defying act and there would be countless difficulties and obstacles along the way. One could only reach the other side by guarding their Dao heart at all times. Yen Beichen glared at Su Zimo with two sharp glints in his eyes and asked coldly, "Why are you cultivating?" Su Zimo's expression was dazed as he recalled the scene of him being bullied by perfected being Tsang Lang in Pingyang town. He recalled the scene of Zhuai Feng turning into ashes to save him. He recalled the scene of peach blossoms falling under the peach blossom tree where a woman in a blood-colored robe imparted cultivation techniques to him. Everything felt like yesterday. Su Zimo murmured softly, "I don't have a spirit root. When I first cultivated, I merely wanted to fight against fate and change my own fate." The scene before him changed. Su Zimo saw his older brother, Su Hong, who was gradually aging. He saw the ruins and bones in the land of Yenj. Under the flames of war and the trampling of cultivators and demon beasts, the mortals were helpless. He saw the tear-stained faces and helpless eyes of everyone in the world. Gradually, Su Zimo's gaze turned resolute as he said slowly, "Right now, I'm not cultivating to change my fate. I want to change the fate for all living beings in the world. I want to establish a Dao. A great Dao that is different from immortals, Buddhas and fiends. A great Dao that can be cultivated without a spirit root. This is my Dao heart." Yen Beichen looked at Su Zimo in silence for a long time. Even with his temperament, he could not help but reveal a look of shock at that moment. Initially, he was merely asking casually. However, he had not expected that Su Zimo's answer would shock him. There was nothing much to say about establishing a Tao heart. One could not judge a Tao heart that wanted to purify the masses as a good one or a Tao heart that yearned for freedom to be a bad one. However, there was still a difference between Tao hearts at the end of the day. For example, some cultivators would be less ambitious if their Tao hearts were for revenge. After a cultivator took revenge, he would definitely encounter a bottleneck and feel lost. The Tao hearts of most cultivators were longevity. If they wanted to live forever, they had to cultivate and break through continuously. There was no end to the path of immortality. Compared to vengeance, the Tao heart for longevity would be more ambitious. However, for Su Zimo, be it the level or ambition of his Tao heart, it was far superior compared to longevity or something like slaying demons and evil. He wanted to alter the fate of all living beings in the world. How magnanimous was that? How heroic was that? How bold was that? Well. Yen Beichen snapped out of his stupor and nodded. Zimo, I'm inferior to you in this aspect. Su Zimo was probably the only person in the world who could make the Asura bow down. Yen Beichen said, the legacy passed down by the mighty figures can only be accessed by entering the inheritance ground. One can only obtain acknowledgement if they have established a Tao heart. That will depend on one's individual opportunities. Su Zimo nodded. He now had a rough understanding of the Tao inheritance ground. The Tao inheritance ground was not only a place with legacies left behind by many mighty figures, it was also a place where cultivators established their Tao hearts. After establishing a Tao heart, every cultivator would be able to have their own Tao title. The Tao inheritance ground has existed since the ancient era and there are still legacies within? Su Zimo was surprised. Of course. Yen Beichen explained. How many conjoint body mighty figures have appeared since the ancient era? In the Tao inheritance ground, apart from the legacies left behind by ancient mighty figures, there would be mighty figures who would enter and leave their legacies in every generation. Furthermore, the truly top-tier dermic legacies are extremely rare and the requirement for one's Tao heart is highly stringent. Not everyone is qualified to inherit them. Top-tier Tao legacies? Su Zimo asked. Yen Beichen said, in the inheritance ground, there are all sorts of strange and odd legacies left behind by powerful beings. It could be a weapon, a gigantic rock or a statue. However, it said that the strongest dozens of mighty figures of the ancient era left their legacies in a unique region. This region is located at the center of the Tao inheritance ground. It's called the Three Tribulations domain. As the name implies, there are three major tribulations in the Three Tribulations domain. The first, Wind Tribulation. The second, Fire Tribulation. The third, Lightning Tribulation. The only way to reach the center of the Three Tribulations domain is to withstand the three major tribulations. That is where you will be able to see the legacies left behind by dozens of ancient mighty figures. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he asked, Brother Yen, you must have entered the Tao inheritance ground back then and cleared the Three Tribulations domain. Did you manage to reach the innermost area? No. Yen Beichen shook his head. I only managed to survive the tribulations of wind and fire and almost died in the lightning tribulation. Chapter 988. Unfair Battle. Chapter 988. Unfair Battle. Su Zimo was secretly shocked. Even with Yen Beichen's strength and temperament, he merely managed to pass two tribulations. It was clear how terrifying those three tribulations were. Su Zimo frowned. Will you really die if you fail to pass the tribulations? Yes. Yen Beichen had a grim expression. It's fine if you can withdraw in time. However, if you try to forcefully transcend the tribulation, your Tao heart might break and you might lose your mind. At worst, your body and essence spirit might be destroyed and you might die. This Three Tribulations domain can be considered as the only dangerous place in the Tao inheritance ground. At that point, Su Zimo was confused and could not help but ask, if that's the case, this place isn't some lion's den or the likes. Why were those people speaking as though I would be in danger once I entered? Isn't it dangerous for you to fight against a peerless monster incarnate like Di-In who is a major cultivation realm above you? Yen Beichen asked instead. Di-In is of no threat to me if it's a fair fight. Su Zimo's gaze was cold and murderous. He had many trump cards. Apart from top-tier cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist sects, He also had a supreme secret manual of the Tao of Fire like the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra. Of course, Su Zimo's greatest trump card was his dragonification after fusing his two essence spirits. At that time, his combat strength would soar and he would even have an 80% chance of killing the Void Reversion Diin. That's the problem. Yen Beichen shook his head. This battle is completely unfair. The Tao Inheritance Ground is a space created by many ancient mighty figures, and can be considered as a sacred ground for humans. If demons enter, although they won't be killed, their bloodlines and essence spirits will be suppressed. In other words, none of the demon race's methods can be used. At that point, Su Zimo finally understood. The reason why Diin set the venue for the challenge at the Tao Inheritance Ground was to restrict his demonic methods. Diin would not be affected at all in the Tao Inheritance Ground while his combat strength would be halved. Yen Beichen asked, "How confident are you in killing Diin without your demonic methods?" Su Zimo was silent. To be fair, he had no confidence in this battle without his demonic methods. Or rather, the possibility of him losing was extremely high. Even the physical body that he relied on the most might not be able to suppress Diin if he could not use his bloodline. As for dermic powers and essence spirit, he was at a disadvantage. After all, there was a difference of a major cultivation realm between the two of them. Furthermore, Diin was an extreme existence even among the titular disciples. Although Diin accepted the challenge, Su Zimo was completely disadvantaged due to the choice of the location. "I don't recommend you accept the challenge," Yen Beichen said. "As long as there is a conjoint body to open it up, the Tao Inheritance Ground can be entered at any moment. The legacies are always there and there's no need for you to rush. However, you'll definitely be up against Diin if you enter this time round. Your chances of winning this battle aren't high." Su Zimo knew that Yen Beichen was already being polite by saying that he did not have a high chance of winning. To others, he had no chance of winning this battle at all. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, "If I can reach the Void Reversion Realm, even at early stage and without any demonic means, I can still fight him." Once he entered the Void Reversion Realm, the black-haired essence spirit's power would increase exponentially. His dermic powers would increase as well. Furthermore, he could use even more trump cards and would definitely not be disadvantaged against Diin. "But you're not at the Void Reversion Realm after all," Yen Beichen said. "You've just broken through to perfected nascent soul for more than a month. If you want to advance further and break through to the Void Reversion Realm, you'll need at least dozens of years. And that's only if you're successful. If you encounter a bottleneck, there have been countless paragons that were stuck at the nascent soul for hundreds of years." Su Zimo knew that Yen Beichen was not lying. After all, the advancement to the Void Reversion Realm from the nascent soul realm was a major realm breakthrough and was even more difficult. Most of the time, if there were no opportunities or encounters and one were to merely rely on hard work through seclusion cultivation, they might not advance at all even after hundreds of years. Yen Beichen continued, "Diin is very smart and didn't give you too much time by setting the life and death battle at the Tao Inheritance Ground a month later. There's no way you can break through to the Void Reversion Realm in a month." A month was a fleeting duration and it was completely impossible if he wanted to break through to the Void Reversion Realm in that period of time. What if? Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he opened his mouth. However, Yen Beichen read Su Zimo's mind instantly and shook his head. "It's even more impossible if you want to break through to the Void Reversion Realm within the Tao Inheritance Ground. The Tao Inheritance Ground is a separate dimension and is isolated from the outside world, so there's no way you can comprehend the heaven and earth. It's a ruin inside and the spirit chi is thin. There's not enough energy for you to absorb." Since the ancient era till now, there has not been a single cultivator who made a breakthrough in the Tao Inheritance Ground. Everyone who entered would leave immediately after receiving the legacies and would not linger inside. Su Zimo went silent. "If you don't go for this battle, no one will laugh at you," Yen Beichen said. "All the cultivators can tell that Diin is wary of your demonic methods. Even with a major cultivation realm difference, he doesn't dare to fight you. However, if you accept the challenge, you'll fall right into his trap." Suddenly, Su Zimo asked, "Brother Yen, if it was you, would you accept the challenge?" After a moment of silence, Yen Beichen suddenly smiled and nodded. "Yes." Su Zimo smiled as well. In a way they were similar. Yen Beichen had come to help Su Zimo this time round and was faced with the top Dharma characteristic cultivators such as Tao Lord Immortal Sword and Tao Lord Cloud Rain. This was a perilous trip as well. However, he still came. Su Zimo did not declare war on Di Yin for himself. Di Yin's existence could not threaten him. What Di Yin threatened were his friends. Su Zimo could not tolerate the fact that Di Yin had nearly killed Little Fatty and Ji Qingtian. The reason why he declared war on Di Yin was because he wanted to eliminate these dangers completely. If he missed this opportunity, Su Zimo did not know how long he would have to wait for the next one. Therefore, he had to accept the challenge and do everything he could to kill Di Yin in the Dao inheritance ground. Furthermore, this battle was initiated by Su Zimo. If he chose to avoid the battle now, it would have a huge impact on his Dao heart and it would definitely become his greatest mental demon in the future. His Dao was fearless. Yen Beichen sighed gently. What a pity. If I had entered the Dharma characteristic realm a step later, I might have been able to enter the Dao inheritance ground this time round and might have been able to help you. Only nascent souls and void reversions were allowed into the Dao inheritance ground. Dharma characteristics and conjoint bodies were not allowed in. Brother Yen, you've already helped me enough. Su Zimo smiled. Boom! Right then, a loud bang sounded from afar and the ground shook. A terrifying aura burst forth and surged into the skies, forming a gigantic pillar of fire that burned all the clouds in the skies red. Fire and auspicious clouds filled the skies. A tremendous pressure spread and silence reigned. Dao Lord Extreme Fire has broken through. Yen Beichen looked into the distance and murmured softly. This is a good thing for you. Extreme Fire is your master. Go and visit him, Yen Beichen added. All right, I'll be right back. Su Zimo wanted to see Dao Lord Extreme Fire and congratulate his master. After bidding farewell to Yen Beichen, he sped off. Chapter 989. No Retreating. Chapter 989. No Retreating. Su Zimo sprinted and arrived at 100 Refinement Sect before long. Uncle Master, you're finally back. Before long, he caught sight of Dao Lord Scarlet Star running over. The latter seemed relieved at the sight of him. Grandmaster Extreme Fire just broke through to the conjoint body realm and was looking for you. Dao Lord Scarlet Star brought Su Zimo to 100 Refinement Sect's main hall. The hall was bright and spacious and some of the 100 Refinement Sect experts who were guarding Dao Lord Extreme Fire's breakthrough had just dispersed. Right now, there were not many people left in the hall. Apart from Dao Lord Extreme Fire and a few other 100 Refinement Sect cultivators, there was also Thousand Crane Sect's Shangguan Zi, Ancient Array Sect's Elder Gu and Elixir Yang Sect's Elder Gu. Su Zimo entered the hall and was shocked when he saw Dao Lord Extreme Fire. Dao Lord Extreme Fire looked the same. However, he stood there like a gigantic furnace that was burning furiously, fusing with the entire world and giving off an unshakable aura. Even the strongest Dharma characteristic could only control 90% of the heaven and earth powers. As for Dao Lord Extreme Fire who had broken through to the conjoint body realm, he was like heaven and earth standing there. Zimo, come sit here. When Dao Lord Extreme Fire caught sight of Su Zimo, he beckoned with a warm gaze. Su Zimo went forward and sat among the Dharma characteristic Dao Lords and conjoint body mighty figures with a calm expression. Dao Lord Extreme Fire asked, do you know about the news of Di Yin accepting your challenge at the Dao inheritance ground? I do. Su Zimo nodded. What are your plans? Dao Lord Extreme Fire asked. Accept the challenge. Su Zimo did not hide his thoughts and merely said 3 words in a resolute manner. Dao Lord Extreme Fire's expression did not change. In the entire cultivation world, he was probably the only one who knew Su Zimo the best. He was not surprised by that answer. Child, how much do you know about the Dao inheritance ground? Shangguan Zi, who was at the side, was fond of Su Zimo as well due to who he was related to and asked with gentle voice. I know a little. Su Zimo said, it's an inheritance ground of the human race and I can't make use of demonic methods inside. Without your demonic methods, how confident are you of winning against Di Yin who is a major cultivation realm apart? Elder Gu asked. Su Zimo replied honestly, I'm not confident at all. Even so, you still want to go? Elder Gu frowned. I have to go. Su Zimo's tone was resolute. Don't be in a hurry to make a decision. I just received some news. Listen to it. Dao Lord Extreme Fire said slowly, apart from Di'in, Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Monk Formless will all be entering the Dao Inheritance Ground as well. Su Zimo's eyes flashed coldly. He could tell from the names of the three cultivators that they were the three great titular disciples of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Zephyr Thunder Palace and Formless Monastery. The purpose of the three titular disciples rushing to the Dao Inheritance Ground was self-evident. Perfected Lord Panglan of Heavenly Dipper Sect died in Su Zimo's hands at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Zephyr Thunder Palace had always wanted to snatch the Purple Thunder Manual from Su Zimo. As for Formless Monastery, their target should be the legacies such as the Creation Green Lotus and the Daming True Sutra. Di'in was already not confident of winning against Di'in alone. Moreover, there were now 3 more titular disciples. Dao Lord Extreme Fire said, every sect only has a single titular disciple and there's no need to elaborate on the strength of this disciple. Even if the 3 of them are weaker than Di'in, they won't be much weaker. Elder Gu nodded as well. That's right. Titular disciples are the face of the various major sections. Almost all of them have to spend thousands or even tens of thousands of years of resources to nurture one. Su Zimo went on a killing spree at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. Even against the encirclement of 8 void reversions, he was able to suppress all 8 of them. What he relied on was his burst power of his dragonification after fusing with his scarlet-haired Een spirit. If he could not use his scarlet-haired Een spirit, activate his bloodline or transform into a dragon, given his current combat strength, it would be difficult to predict the outcome against any of the titular disciples. Noticing Su Zimo's silence, Elder Gu said, you might not know these 3 titular disciples since you've just arrived in the Middle Continent. All 3 of them were once the top of the phenomenon ranking and have never tasted defeat among the same cultivation realm. The 3 of them have been famous for a long time and are the strongest monster incarnates of the current era with outstanding track records in battle. More than 100 years ago, Dao being Heavenly Dipper fought against the Asura of the current era and there was no clear victor. Su Zimo was shocked. He had witnessed Yen Beichen's combat strength personally. The fact that Dao being Heavenly Dipper could fight Yen Beichen with no clear victor produced was proof of his frightening combat strength. Hesitation surfaced within Su Zimo's heart. He suddenly experienced tremendous pressure that was even suffocating. The enemies he was about to face were way too strong. If he were to enter the Dao Inheritance Ground this time round, he would have to face the greatest danger in his path of cultivation so far. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Su Zimo's sudden appearance had finally triggered the greatest reaction of the super sects. They were willing to send forth their titular disciples just to kill him. Dao Lord Extreme Fire said, apart from the 3 of them, I reckon Sword Sect will make a move as well. Sword Sect's titular disciple was a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord. Although he could not enter the Dao Inheritance Ground, Sword Sect would definitely not let Su Zimo off since he possessed the heaven-slaying sword art. Shangguanzi said, these are only confirmed news. There are still some unknowns and uncertainties. The actual situation you're going to face will be even worse than what you know now. The Dao Inheritance Ground was not some secret space. As long as one was at the conjoint body realm, they would be able to activate it. At that time, who knew how many cultivators would swarm in? However, it was unknown how many of them were targeting Su Zimo. Su Zimo frowned deeply and remained silent. Everyone knew that he was facing a difficult decision. If he were to back off, his life would not be in danger. With Dao Lord Extreme Fire as his backing, his future potential will be limitless. If he entered, he would most likely die. Shangguanzi said gently, actually, you don't have to feel burdened. None of us are agreeable with you accepting the challenge in the Dao Inheritance Ground. Dao Lord Extreme Fire nodded. The Dao Inheritance Ground is a space created by many ancient mighty figures. It has a unique barrier that only allows nascent souls and void reversions to enter. I've just advanced to the conjoint body and can help you open up the Dao Inheritance Ground. However, if you encounter danger inside, my power won't be able to penetrate that barrier and I won't be of any help. After a brief pause, Dao Lord Extreme Fire continued, the void reversion Dao beings of 100 Refinement Sect can enter, but they won't be able to withstand a single blow against any titular disciple. They'll only die for nothing if they enter to help you. Although his words sounded heartless, it was an undeniable truth. None of the void reversions dared to enter the Dao inheritance ground and stand on Su Zimo's side. This meant that Su Zimo would have to face everything on his own once he entered the Dao inheritance ground. Elder Gu persuaded, "You don't have to make a decision in a hurry. You still have a month to consider. There's still time." Dao Lord Extreme Fire and the others exchanged glances and prepared to retreat quietly, leaving Su Zimo alone. "I've made up my mind." Just as Extreme Fire and the others arrived at the entrance of the hall, Su Zimo's voice sounded. "A month later, I'll enter the Dao inheritance ground and accept all challenges." After saying that, Su Zimo felt as though all the pressure on his body disappeared instantly and he relaxed. His Dao did not allow for any retreating. Chapter 990. Farewell Gift. Chapter 990. Farewell Gift. Upon hearing Su Zimo's decision, Dao Lord Extreme Fire smiled gently and turned to look at Shangguanzi, Elder Gu and the others. "I won." Unexpected, truly unexpected. Elder Gu shook his head and laughed bitterly. Elder Gu lamented, "That's right. To think that he would dare accept the challenge despite almost certain doom. His guts and boldness are worthy of all his glory." Before this, everyone made a bet. Everyone guessed that Su Zimo would definitely not accept the challenge as long as they explained the dangers. Only Dao Lord Extreme Fire believed that Su Zimo would definitely go. Dao Lord Extreme Fire said, "Since I won this gamble, I'll now have to trouble all of you. I admit defeat." "Don't worry." Elder Gu and the others laughed. Su Zimo was confused and was about to ask when Dao Lord Extreme Fire turned to look at him with a smile. "Go on, there's still a month to go. Relax and adjust your state of mind. Come and look for me here in a month." "All right." Su Zimo nodded and left. Arriving outside the hall, Su Zimo stood against the wind, his black hair fluttering with a resolute gaze. If this bit of danger was enough to frighten him from advancing, there was no need for him to establish any Dao. He might as well learn from others and merely seek the Dao of immortality. Su Zimo moved and headed out of 100 Refinement Sect, intending to bid farewell to Yen Beichen. When he arrived at the mountain peak, he realized that the cave abode was empty. There was a line of words on the wall. "Zimo, I've already left. Don't worry." The words were carved with the edge of a blade and were filled with saber intent. Su Zimo smiled gently. That was indeed Yen Beichen's character. He was carefree and unrestrained, coming and going as he pleased. Su Zimo decided to enter seclusion in the cave abode. He looked at the words on the wall and used his palm as a saber, trying to figure out the saber intent within. Su Zimo was in no rush. Even if he cultivated with all his might, there was no way he could break through to the void reversion realm within a month. For the following days, Su Zimo was extremely relaxed. He would sit at the entrance of the cave and watch the sun rise and set. Occasionally, he would face the wall and practice his saber techniques. After nightfall, he laid down to rest. Although he barely cultivated, his condition improved consistently. At the same time, news spread and the entire cultivation world was in an uproar. Su Zimo accepted the challenge. A long time ago, when Di'in set up the venue for the challenge at the Dao Inheritance Ground, countless news and guesses were spread. Almost no one thought highly of Su Zimo. Later on, when they heard that the titular disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Heavenly Dipper Sect and the other immortal sects were about to enter the place as well, many cultivators were certain that Su Zimo would not accept the challenge. If nascent souls entered the Dao Inheritance Ground, they would be courting death if they were faced with a few titular disciples. However, not long after, news of Su Zimo accepting the challenge spread and caused an uproar. After 100 years, the two monster incarnates, Su Zimo and Di'in, will fight once more in the Dao Inheritance Ground in a life-and-death battle. I reckon that Su Zimo will be killed by the other titular disciples before he gets to see Di'in. A few titular disciples appearing at the same time to kill a monster incarnate. This can be considered as the greatest commotion in the history of the cultivation world. It's going to be interesting. Some were shocked, some mocked and some were worried. For the past month, All the sects and factions that had the ability to open up the rift into the Dao inheritance ground would send their cultivators in anticipation of witnessing this unprecedented battle. A month later, Su Zimo walked out of his cave abode. Although his cultivation realm did not change, his mental state and spirit were already at their peak. When he returned to 100 Refinement Sect's main hall, Dao Lord Extreme Fire and the others were already waiting. Dao Lord Extreme Fire slapped his storage bag and took out a cold saber and a shimmering golden inner armor. He wielded the saber and injected dermic powers into it. The saber quivered and 6 lines burst forth. This saber is called Heaven Splitter. It's a connate Dao being dermic weapon. With that said, Dao Lord Extreme Fire waved his hand casually and a bedazzling saber beam tore through the air, as though it was going to split the heavens. This inner armor is a perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon. Its size can change with your body. Dao Lord Extreme Fire handed Heaven Splitter and the inner armor to Su Zimo. I won't be able to help you with anything after you enter the Dao inheritance ground. Thankfully, I managed to refine 2 dermic weapons this month and they're not bad. Take them. Thank you, Master. Su Zimo was touched and did not decline. He put on his inner armor and kept Heaven Splitter in his storage bag. His trip was fraught with danger and Heaven Splitter and the inner armor were things that he lacked. Of course, given Dao Lord Extreme Fire's capabilities, refining a Dao Lord dermic weapon was nothing difficult. However, for Su Zimo, even if he had a Dao Lord dermic weapon, it would be difficult for him to use it. It was already his limit for his essence spirit to be able to use Dao being dermic weapons. Hang this jade pendant on your waist. In times of danger, all you have to do is shatter it and you'll be able to defend against the strongest attack of a void reversion once. Shangguanzi took out a jade pendant and handed it to Su Zimo. Protection dermic weapon. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Back in the intermediate ancient battlefield, if Di'in had not crushed his protection dermic weapon, he would have been killed by Su Zimo. Protection dermic weapons were extremely rare and were even more precious than connate dermic weapons. There was no market for them and it was unknown how many runes were fused into them, making them difficult to refine. Up till this point of his cultivation, despite many fights with paragons and monster incarnates, Su Zimo had only encountered it once during his fight with Di'in. This is way too precious. Su Zimo had just extended his hand when he shook his head and retracted it. Take it. With a gentle gaze, Shangguanzi smiled and said, We made a bet with your master previously and we lost. This is the bet. Ah! Suddenly, Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Lad, take it. Elder Gu chuckled. It's not just about the stakes. Can't you tell the relationship between Shangguanzi and your master? Although Shangguanzi was already thousands of years old, she blushed when she heard that and glared at Elder Gu. Su Zimo smiled and received the jade pendant hurriedly. Thank you, master's wife. Child, what nonsense are you spouting? Shangguanzi was delighted to be addressed as master's wife. However, she still pretended to be reserved on the surface and scolded him in a moderate tone. Dao Lord Extreme Fire coughed gently and changed the topic. He looked at Elder Gu of Elixir Yang sect and asked, Old Gu, where's your bet? Don't worry, I won't mistreat your precious disciple. With a flip of his palm, a small bottle appeared in Elder Ge's palm. He handed it to Su Zimo and said in a deep voice, This is the Great Essence Life Preservation Elixir. Unless your essence spirit is killed directly, no matter how severely injured you are or even on the brink of death, you'll be able to survive with a single breath as long as you consume this elixir. Su Zimo was shocked. That was a treasure that was no weaker than a protection dermic weapon. Elder Gu reminded once more, Remember, this elixir can keep you alive for a month at most. You'll still have to find other methods to properly survive. It could only preserve his life and not save it. Even so, that elixir was already heaven-defying enough. Each of those gifts was more impressive than the previous. Dao Lord Extreme Fire had already done everything he could for Su Zimo. Chapter 991, Life and Death. Chapter 991, Life and Death. Old Gu, where's your stuff? Dao Lord Extreme Fire and the others looked at Elder Gu with mocking gazes. Shangguanzi harumphed and said, Old man Gu, look at what we took out. If your stuff is too lousy, Don't take it out to embarrass yourself. Shangguan, the two of you haven't even become Dao companions and you're already so biased towards Extreme Fire's disciple. Seriously. Elder Gu puffed his beard and glared, looking slightly troubled indeed. 100 Refinement sect could refine weapons, 1000 Crane sect could create talismans, Elixir Yang sect could refine elixirs while Ancient Array sect could only set up formations. He had indeed prepared a gift, a sword formation technique. However, looking at it now, his sword formation technique was way too inferior compared to the Protection Dermic weapon and Great Essence Life Preservation elixir. Looking at the mocking gazes of Dao Lord Extreme Fire and the other two, Elder Gu gritted his teeth and took out a beast hide from his storage bag, handing it to Su Zimo. What's that? Elder Gu could not help but lean forward and mutter, Are you trying to fool us with a piece of beast hide? Dao Lord Extreme Fire and Shangguan Zi swept their gazes across and were shocked when they saw the complicated and mysterious patterns on the beast hide. Old Gu, you're even willing to take this out? Dao Lord Extreme Fire asked. Elder Gu grit his teeth. It's all because of you guys. Hurry and take it away or I might regret it. Shangguan Zi looked at Su Zimo and smiled. Take it. This is one of the few treasures that Old Man Gu has in his possession. Curious, Su Zimo received the beast hide and took a look at it. The beast hide was etched with mysterious formation patterns that formed a fan shape. It was 100 times more complicated than any formation pattern Su Zimo had seen before. Elder Gu said, There was a teleportation formation in the primordial era. As long as it was activated, it could teleport cultivators millions of miles away. It wouldn't be a problem for them to cross the entire Tianhuang mainland. Unfortunately, the formation patterns have long been lost. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he exclaimed, This is the formation pattern of the teleportation formation. Humph. Elder Gu said, You wish. This is merely a damaged formation pattern of the teleportation formation. However, if you can comprehend it, you'll be able to gain something as well. Although it was only an incomplete formation, the treasure was still shocking enough. To a certain extent, it was even more precious than Dao Lord Extreme Fire and the others' dermic weapons and elixirs. Elder Gu thought for a moment and coughed gently. Also, don't blame me for not reminding you. If you can comprehend it and activate this incomplete formation, don't enter it recklessly. The cultivators you lost earlier haven't returned? Dao Lord Extreme Fire asked. With an embarrassed expression, Elder Gu harumphed and did not reply. For the sake of Elder Gu, Shangguan Zi sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo. 5,000 years ago, Old Man Gu set up this incomplete formation according to the formation patterns on it. At that time, there were 10 cultivators in Ancient Array sect who volunteered to give it a try. However, they never returned after they were teleported out. Even after 5,000 years, there's still no news of them. They should be doomed. Su Zimo was secretly speechless. Although this incomplete formation was precious, it was truly dangerous. Who knew where they would be teleported to after activation? If they were teleported to somewhere like the lair of the Dragonbone Valley, they would be killed by the dragon race right away. They wouldn't be able to survive even if they had 10 lives. Su Zimo put away the beast hide. At least for now, he had no use for it. Once everything was prepared, Dao Lord Extreme Fire closed his eyes and spread his spirit consciousness to sense the spatial node of the place. All of a sudden, Dao Lord Extreme Fire extended his palm and a ball of flames appeared in it. A hole appeared in the void and grew larger. It was dark and hazy inside. Go! Dao Lord Extreme Fire said, I can maintain this teleportation entrance for about a month. If anything goes wrong, retreat to this entrance and return in time. Nodding, Su Zimo took a deep breath and leaped into the gigantic hole in the void, vanishing from sight. Sigh, with a few titular disciples there, he's most likely going to die on this trip. Shangguan Zi sighed. Dao Lord Extreme Fire said in a low voice, There's still a chance. If he can establish his Dao heart and obtain the legacies of the mighty figures within, his combat strength will increase. There's not much use. Elder Gu shook his head. Even if he obtained the legacy of a mighty figure, the spirit chi within is dried up and there's almost no way for him to cultivate. There's still no way for him to advance his cultivation realm. There's a major cultivation realm difference and his demonic methods are suppressed. There's almost no shot at victory against Dean and the others. Tao Lord Extreme Fire murmured softly. I hope he can tide through this tribulation. Call Tao being Yuding and the others over. Tao Lord Extreme Fire instructed once more. Before long, Tao being Yuding and dozens of void reversions arrived. Some of you have already established your Tao hearts and some of you haven't. For this trip, all you have to do is search for your own opportunities as per normal. Tao Lord Extreme Fire did not request for the sex disciples to help Su Zimo. Even if he requested, none of the disciples would dare to help. Although they were void reversions, their combat strength was way too inferior compared to titular disciples. Who would dare to risk their lives to help Su Zimo? Right then, 100 Refinement Sect Cultivator walked in briskly with an excited expression. Sect Master, there's a fiend demon outside who tried to infiltrate the sect. He's been locked by the demon revealing mirror and his true form is a WYRM. After pausing for a moment, the cultivator hesitated. However, that fiend demon called himself Solitary Cloud and said that he knows Su Zimo's. Tao Lord Extreme Fire exclaimed softly with a puzzled expression. Bring him here. His essence spirit had always been in the Mingwang prayer beads and naturally knew that Solitary Cloud was a pure-blooded WYRM that Su Zimo subdued in Thousand Demon Valley. Before long, Solitary Cloud was brought into the main hall. He looked a little pale, as though he had suffered a serious injury earlier on. It's really you. Tao Lord Extreme Fire recognized Solitary Cloud instantly and asked with a frown. What are you doing here? Didn't Zimo leave you at Howling Moon Mountain? Solitary Cloud did not know Tao Lord Extreme Fire. However, the moment he left Howling Moon Mountain, he heard news of the cultivation world and knew that 100 Refinement Sect was on Su Zimo's side. Solitary Cloud knelt on the ground and cupped his fists. Seniors, I was originally a ferocious WYRM of Thousand Demon Valley. I was only accepted as a mount because my master favored me. I heard that master's trip to the Tao inheritance ground is extremely dangerous. How can I remain indifferent and stay out of it? Seniors, please allow me to enter and stand shoulder to shoulder with master. Little WYRM, you sure are loyal. Elder Gu chuckled. However, that place is the sacred ground of the human race. You don't know what's going on inside. When fiend demons enter, they won't be able to conjure their true forms or release any demonic arts. The only thing you can use is your body. I know. Solitary Cloud nodded. This time round, Tao Lord Extreme Fire and the others did not laugh. Elder Gu frowned. Do you know that there are countless cultivators inside? If your identity as a fiend demon is exposed, you will die without a burial ground. I know. Solitary Cloud nodded. Do you know that even Su Zimo has no confidence against Dean and the others? Entering is equivalent to courting death. Solitary Cloud replied, I know. You still want to go after knowing? Elder Gu asked. Solitary Cloud said, I once made an oath to follow my master through life and death. Everyone was moved. Chapter 992. Entering the Sacred Grounds. Chapter 992. Entering the Sacred Grounds. Tao Lord Extreme Fire's gaze gradually softened as he said softly. You're injured right now and it's our 100 Refinement Sect's fault for being reckless. Rest for a day first and don't be too anxious. That's right. You won't be of much help even if you go in like this. Elder Gu went forward and stuffed 2 small bottles into Solitary Cloud's hands. The white bottle is to be applied on external wounds and the red bottle is to be consumed for internal injuries. Your injuries will heal very quickly. Thank you, Senior. Solitary Cloud nodded and was brought to rest by 100 Refinement Sect disciples. He was prepared to head to the Tao inheritance ground after resting for a day. Shangguan Zi and the others watched Solitary Cloud leave with conflicted expressions. Elder Gu sighed. To think that there's such a loyal person among the fiend demons. How admirable. Tao Lord Extreme Fire said, demons are the same as humans. There are both good and evil. At times, after interacting with demons for a long time, I really like their straightforward and carefree nature. They are not hypocritical nor scheming. Su Zimo had stayed in Thousand Demon Valley for 100 years and Tao Lord Extreme Fire had witnessed every single moment he spent with Monkey and the others. On top of a ruin, a strong gust of wind blew and gravel filled the air. There was no sign of life and everything was barren. All of a sudden, a gigantic hole opened up in the firmament, dark and deep. From within, a figure fell out and stabilized himself the moment he arrived in midair. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and released his spirit consciousness, scanning every single corner. "Is this the Tao inheritance ground?" he murmured softly. After checking for a long time, he retracted his spirit consciousness slowly. "There's no danger nearby, but the spirit chi is really thin." Su Zimo channeled his bloodline slowly. Swoosh! The surrounding space sensed something and a massive pressure descended upon him instantly. He could not move at all against that pressure. True enough. Su Zimo felt that if he were to forcefully activate his bloodline, he would be crushed by the pressure instantly. This was the will of many ancient mighty figures. This was the sacred ground of the human race and countless human experts had left their legacies here. No other race was allowed to lay their hands on it. Su Zimo did not dare to move recklessly. The bloodline in his body gradually calmed down and the massive pressure vanished as well, as though it had never appeared. After a moment of silence, the scarlet-haired Een spirit in Su Zimo's consciousness stirred. There was no reaction from the surroundings and the pressure from earlier did not appear. Most likely, even the ancient mighty figures did not expect that an anomaly like Su Zimo would appear in the future. He tried a few times. Su Zimo discovered that his scarlet-haired Een spirit could move about freely within his consciousness, and could even fuse with the black-haired essence spirit. However, the scarlet-haired Een spirit could not release its spirit consciousness. Furthermore, if the fused essence spirit were to release its spirit consciousness or dermic arts, it would attract similar pressure from the ancient mighty figures. In other words, his demon techniques were indeed suppressed fully. Su Zimo was not discouraged. He had expected this. After determining his direction, Su Zimo headed towards the east. He did not move fast and was constantly paying attention to his surroundings. Before long, a gigantic stone stele appeared in front of him. It was more than 100 feet tall and stood upright in the ruins, exuding the aura of time. More than 10 void reversions stood at the foot of the stele. Su Zimo walked closer and looked up. There were a few lines of words on the stone stele that were written with pride in a flamboyant manner. "My Tao title is Scarlet Peak. I've cultivated for 5,000 years and finally entered the conjoint body realm." A Dharma characteristic Tao Lord had a lifespan of 10,000 years and would be right in his peak after cultivating for 5,000 years. The fact that he was able to advance to the conjoint body realm at this point meant that he could definitely be considered as a paragon. "I dominated the world and rarely lost. I'm ranked 78th on the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking and 65th on the Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic ranking. I once killed 3 paragons of the immortal sects." The words on the stele were clearly left behind by mighty figure Scarlet Peak, and most of them were reminiscing about his past glory. "Alas, I did not manage to break through to the final step after 15,000 years and ended at the conjoint body realm. What a pity. Even with the glory of the world, what can I do? In the end, I couldn't withstand the passage of time and turned into dust." Cultivators could extend their lifespans to 20,000 years after entering the conjoint body realm. This mighty figure Scarlet Peak had advanced to the conjoint body realm at 5,000 years old. To think that he was still unable to advance to the Mahayana realm after 15,000 years. Chi condensation, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul, void reversion, dharma characteristic, conjoint body, Mahayana and tribulation transcendence. The further one progressed, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. Mighty figure Scarlet Peak was almost at the peak of the cultivation world. However, he was still unable to extend his lifespan and died with regrets. This was the cruelty of cultivation. "Before my death, I entered this place and sorted out everything I've learned in my life. I left behind a copy of the Howling World scripture to await a fated one." That was the final sentence on the stele. "I'm willing to pursue the Tao of immortality with no qualms for the rest of my life to make up for your regrets, Senior. Please grant me your legacy and I'll make sure I live up to your reputation." A void reversion stood in front of the stone stele and shouted. The moment he said that, another void reversion said, "Senior Scarlet Peak, both my parents are dead and they were devoured by demon beasts. I'm willing to devote my life to slaying and exterminating demons and evil. In my crusade around the world, I'll return peace to it. Senior Scarlet Peak, I'm willing to lead a carefree life of freedom. Please grant me your legacy, Senior. One cultivator after another established their Dao hearts beneath the steel. Generally speaking, if a cultivator's Dao heart was compatible with the wishes of this ancient mighty figure, the inheritance would descend. Of course, there were all sorts of conditions to trigger an opportunity. Some conjoint body mighty figures would bluntly state that cultivators were only qualified after they passed the wind and fire tribulations. Before long, more than 10 cultivators shouted one after another. However, there was still no reaction from the stone steel. Fellow Taoist, aren't you coming over to give it a try? Some cultivators noticed Su Zimo and greeted him with cupped fists. No. Su Zimo smiled and shook his head. Apart from fighting against Di'in, he had another motive for entering the Dao inheritance ground. He wanted to establish his Dao heart and search for a suitable legacy to inherit. Although the legacy left behind by mighty figure Scarlet Peak was decent, it did not match his expectations. Let's go and look for others. The group of cultivators dispersed quickly, leaving behind a skinny man who knelt motionlessly before the stone steel. Who is that? He was already kneeling here before we arrived. I don't know. I heard that he's an itinerant cultivator who doesn't belong to any sect. He seems to have knelt here for many years without leaving. There is something wrong with that man as well. If he can't get the approval of mighty figure Scarlet Peak, he can just change to another person. How can he be so stubborn? Many cultivators discussed. Right then the steel shook and dust fell. A bedazzling beam of light burst forth from the gigantic steel and shot into the skies. The birth of a phenomenon. Someone has inherited a legacy. Everyone stopped in their tracks and stared at the steel with their mouths agape. Typically, phenomenons would appear if any legacies were inherited. The skinny man was emotional as he reached out and placed his palm gently on the stone steel. Suddenly, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the steel. This meant that the skinny man had obtained the acknowledgement of mighty figure Scarlet Peak, and entered the steel to receive the inheritance. Su Zimo nodded to himself. This man had waited devotedly for many years. The fact that he was able to achieve such an outcome was a sign that his sincerity had bore fruits. Chapter 993. Meeting an Old Friend. Chapter 993. Meeting an Old Friend. Su Zimo continued forward. Before long, a stone statue appeared before him. The stone statue was leaning against a green stone with a lazy expression. Dressed in a sloppy manner, it had its chest half opened and intoxicated eyes. In its left hand was a wine jar that looked extremely lifelike. A few lines of words were written beside the stone statue. I am Drunken Life, and I enjoyed a lifetime of good wine. All of you are cultivating for the sake of longevity, but I am doing it just so I can drink for a few more years. Ha 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 ha. Phenomenon ranking? Dharma characteristic ranking? None of them are as satisfying as good wine. As the saying goes, the long road of cultivation is nothing compared to the life of a drunk. In Su Zimo's eyes, mighty figure Drunken Life seemed to have come alive with just a few words. He was wild and unrestrained, living in a drunken stupor. This mighty figure seemed like he was still drinking wildly as he wrote those sentences. His handwriting was messy and sketchy. He was dead drunk. The fact that this mighty figure was able to cultivate to the conjoint body realm, just for the sake of enjoying wine for a few more years, was proof of how exceptional he was. I heard that this mighty figure Drunken Life was extremely famous in the cultivation world back then. Even though he did not mention anything about his glory, this senior was once ranked 10th on the phenomenon ranking and 9th on the Dharma characteristic ranking. His combat strength is shocking. Many cultivators discussed softly. Mighty figure Drunken Life was clearly much stronger than mighty figure Scarlet Peak from earlier on. There were even more cultivators gathered around this stone statue. There were dozens of them, and cultivators were still rushing over from afar. I'm seeking longevity. I'm also willing to seek the Tao of immortality in my lifetime. I like to drink wine just like you, senior. Many cultivators shouted around the stone statue, and their Tao hearts were of all sorts. Most of them sought the Tao of immortality. However, The stone statue did not move at all. Right then, a cultivator squeezed through the crowd and arrived beside the stone statue. He took out a jar of wine from his storage bag and removed its mud seal, filling the air with the fragrance of wine. "Senior, I've brought good wine to see you." As he said that, he poured the wine into the wine jar in the hands of the stone statue. Swoosh! Suddenly, the entire stone statue moved. Opening its mouth slightly, it released a stream of wine chi that surged into the clouds and shrouded that person. In the blink of an eye, that person vanished on the spot. Fuck, that works too. This senior drunken life is way too casual. Sigh, why didn't I think of that? Some cultivators were stunned, some sighed and some were regretful. Suzumo could not help but laugh. This senior drunken life was truly a carefree person. Look at that green-robed cultivator. Could he be the monster incarnate Suzumo who's been extremely famous recently? From the crowd, a void reversion pointed at Suzumo and said in a mysterious manner, "I heard that Suzumo has a terrifying physique and is invincible in melee combat. He must be tall and strong. That man looks handsome, refined and thin. Could it be him?" Don't be alarmed. There are many people who wear green robes. How can every one of them be Suzumo? Haha, I was just saying it casually. How can there be such a coincidence? Look at how scared you guys are. The first cultivator who spoke laughed. The first time Suzumo revealed himself in the Middle Continent was at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. However, at the Thousand Crane Tea Party, almost all of them were nascent souls. Not many void reversions of the cultivation world had seen Suzumo before. Hurry up and take a look. They're fighting over there. Where? Who's with whom? The Wind Sword inheritance guarded by Sword Sect was intruded by another sword cultivator and both parties fought. Let's go and take a look. The void reversions that were initially gathered around the stone statue swarmed in a certain direction. Suzumo pondered for a moment before following. Before long, Suzumo heard the sounds of sword chi and metal clashing with his strong hearing. On the horizon far away, there was a sword that towered into the clouds. It was dozens of feet tall and stabbed diagonally into the ground in an extremely shocking manner. Beneath the sword, sword lights danced. 7 sword cultivators of Sword Sect walked in a specific direction and connected with one another, forming an extremely mysterious sword formation that trapped another sword cultivator in the middle. All 7 Sword Sect cultivators were at the perfected void reversion realm. In their hands, the sword formation was clearly at the peak of perfection and was well coordinated. Sword chi surged and became sharper and more resplendent. The sword cultivator that was trapped had black hair and black robes. His face was slightly pale and his eyes were hollow. His cultivation realm was only at the early stage void reversion realm. Initially, the black-robed sword cultivator could still retaliate a few times. However, as the sword formation was fully released, that person could only dodge continuously and defend passively. He was completely disadvantaged. Suzumo's expression changed. He did not know any of the Sword Sect cultivators. However, this black-robed sword cultivator was an old friend. It was Dugu Jian of the aristocratic families of the North region. Dugu Jian was introverted and silent, never someone who would take the initiative to converse with others. It was as though the only thing in his eyes was the sword in his hands. However, Suzumo had a rather good impression of him. It was not only because Dugu Jian had helped him back in the Great Qian ruins. More than that, 100 years ago in Myriad Phenomenon City, when the calamity arrived and all the paragons retreated, Dugu Jian was the first to step forward. In Suzumo's eyes, he was the true embodiment of a sword cultivator. To think that after 100 years, this old friend of his had already entered the void reversion realm. Suzumo observed for a moment. Apart from the 7 Sword Sect cultivators on the battlefield, there were more than 10 Sword Sect cultivators guarding the surroundings of the battlefield with sharp gazes, forbidding outsiders from interfering. At the foot of the gigantic sword lay the corpses of a few Sword Sect cultivators. They were all struck in the glabella and died with a single strike. Those were clean kills. To be fair, Sword Sect is indeed a little overbearing. The inheritance of the Dao inheritance ground is all dependent on opportunities. However, Sword Sect has dominated the inheritance of this mighty figure Wind Sword all year round and forbids others from entering. Isn't that right? Sigh. Sword sect is powerful and it's the pilgrimage ground of all sword cultivators in the world. Who would dare to go against them? Many cultivators in the crowd discussed. This black-robed man's methods are not weak. Earlier on, he barged in alone and killed a sword cultivator of sword sect in a few moves. His sword techniques are extremely fast. Unfortunately, he came at the wrong time. Initially, there were only 20 sword cultivators from sword sect guarding the inheritance of the wind sword. However, these 7 sword cultivators entered later and they specialized in sword sect's 7 luminary sword formation. If the 7 of them were to join forces, they would be able to fight against titular disciples. I heard that these 7 sword cultivators came for that monster incarnate, Xueqi. In the end, they witnessed the battle between the black-robed man and the sword cultivators of sword sect. Because of that, the 7 of them attacked decisively and surrounded him. The difference in their cultivation realms is too great. If this continues, the black-robed man will definitely die. Just as the person was analyzing, a tremendous force pushed him away from behind. Enraged, he turned around and glared at the green-robed cultivator who was squeezing over, asking coldly, "Why are you squeezing? Can't you see?" Anyone who could enter the Dao inheritance ground had some capabilities. This person came from one of the 108 upper sects and was naturally not willing to be pushed back. "Excuse me." Xueqi glanced at that person indifferently and pushed him away casually, walking towards the battlefield beneath the sword. "Humph!" That person spat at Xueqi's back view and scolded. "What are you so arrogant for? You look like you're rushing to die. Do you think that you're Xueqi just because you're wearing green robes?" Chapter 994. 2 Successive Kills. Chapter 994. 2 Successive Kills. In a battle with sword sect involved, none of the cultivators dared to step forward for fear of being implicated. They merely watched from afar and discussed softly. At that moment, Xueqi was extremely eye-catching as he walked towards the battlefield. "Who is that? Is he looking to die?" "I don't know. He doesn't have any sect emblem on him either. He's probably an itinerant cultivator." "Wait, that person's cultivation realm is so low. He's only at the nascent soul realm. How dare a nascent soul come to the Dao inheritance ground at this time? He truly has a death wish." All the cultivators pointed at Xueqi's back view. The dozens of sword cultivators standing outside the battlefield noticed Xueqi as well. "Back down!" The sword cultivator facing Xueqi hollered at him with a cold gaze. Xueqi had a calm expression and naturally would not be scared off by a sword cultivator as he continued forward. "You must have a death wish." Without saying anything more, the sword cultivator leaped forward and drew his sword with a clang. He became one with the sword and pierced forward like a stream of light. Shoo! In the blink of an eye, the sword beam had already arrived before Xueqi without any mercy. Xueqi's expression was calm and there was not a single ripple in his eyes. The sword cultivator did not take him seriously at all. Although his attacks looked sharp, he did not use his full strength. In Xueqi's eyes, he was full of openings. At that moment, he had at least 10 different methods to kill the sword cultivator. Xueqi's body swayed for a moment and the sword right past his cheek, missing by a millimeter. The sword cultivator's heart skipped a beat. A dodge like that required an extremely terrifying combat talent and rich battle experience. Any mistake would result in death. "He's not simple." That thought flashed through the sword cultivator's mind. Just as he was about to turn his sword and slash horizontally, he saw a fair and slender finger piercing towards his eyes. Xueqi was not going to give the person a second chance to attack after the mistake. Stretching out his finger, he pierced the person's glabella. The person's essence spirit was also shattered by the dermic powers released by Xueqi's fingers. This nascent soul really dared to head forward. "I'm willing to bet that the outcome will be decided in a single round. The sword cultivator of sword sect only needs a single slash." A cultivator's voice came to an abrupt stop in the crowd. All the cultivators widened their eyes in disbelief at the scene on the battlefield. The cultivator was right. Indeed, the outcome of the fight was decided in a single round. However, the one who lost was the sword sect cultivator. Thud. When the sword cultivator's corpse fell to the ground, many cultivators snapped out of their shock and exclaimed, "Am I seeing things? How is that possible?" A void reversion of Sword Sect was killed by a single move of a nascent soul. Furthermore, he killed the cultivator with his bare hands. Perhaps this sword cultivator was too careless. The crowd was in an uproar. The dozen sword cultivators who were initially standing there in silence were alarmed as they closed in. All of them had hostile expressions and sharp gazes. "Who are you?" a sword cultivator questioned loudly. "I'm the person you're looking for." Zimo did not stop in his tracks. There was a mocking look in his eyes as he smiled. "Why do you guys not recognize me now that I'm here?" These sword cultivators had been guarding the wind sword inheritance all these years and knew nothing about the cultivation world, let alone Zimo. However, the 7 sword cultivators that were initially attacking Dugujian felt their hearts skip a beat and glanced over. That single glance shocked the 7 of them. Zimo. The 7 of them entered the inheritance ground because of Zimo's. Although they had never seen Zimo before, there were sword sect cultivators who described his appearance. Not every cultivator with a green robe might be Zimo. However, if there was a nascent soul in green robes with refined features and could kill a void reversion in a single move, Zimo was probably the only one. The 7 of them were alarmed and almost caused the 7 luminary sword formation to stop. Thankfully, the 7 of them were experienced and composed. They continued to circulate their sword formations and channeled their dermic powers, preparing to kill Dugujian as soon as possible. "All of you, join forces and stop him," a sword cultivator who seemed to be the leader of the 7 shouted. His words were clear. He did not expect the dozen of them to be able to kill Zimo. He only hoped that they could stop Zimo for a moment and give them 7 more time. "Don't worry, senior brother Li Quan. Leave this person to me. I'll definitely behead him within 10 breaths. A sword cultivator volunteered bravely. There was a hint of disdain in that person's heart. He could not understand why senior brother Li Quan would be so cautious against a nascent soul and even ask them to attack together. "Ni." The moment the person turned around and was about to advance with his sword, he heard a loud and sacred Sanskrit sound. The Sanskrit sound shocked him and even his essence spirit shuddered. Sound domain secret skill. A thought flashed through his mind. However, that momentary daze caused his vision to blur. A green figure had already arrived before him, and extended a fair and slender finger to tap gently on his glabella. He could clearly see the finger stabbing over, but he could not dodge it at all. He was stunned by the Sanskrit sound and his reaction was extremely slow. Poof! A bloody hole appeared on his glabella. His essence spirit was destroyed. The 2 sword cultivators died in the same manner. The commotion in the crowd was even more obvious. It was only then that many cultivators, including the sword cultivators present, realized that the death of 2 sword cultivators was definitely not a coincidence. This person. Could he be Zimo? A trembling voice sounded from the crowd. The cultivator who spat at Zimo earlier on shuddered in fear and murmured with a pale face. "And no way, right? Apart from him, who else could possess such terrifying combat strength at the nascent soul realm?" A cultivator asked. Right then, Dao being Li Quan who was besieging Dugujian was getting anxious as well and could not help but shout. "This man is the #1 monster incarnate of history, Zimo. He can kill void reversions above his level. Don't be careless. All you have to do is join forces and hold him off for a moment." The moment he said that, the crowd exploded. Zimo is really here. This is the #1 perfected lord of Tianhuang mainland? I heard that he has a strong physique and is invincible in melee combat. Why does he look frail and scholarly? If they had not seen it with their own eyes, no one would associate Zimo with all the titles given. #1 of the phenomenon ranking, #1 perfected lord, his frightening physique and invincibility in melee combat. Ha 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 ha. When he heard Dao being Li Quan's shout, Zimo reared his head in laughter. Slapping his storage bag, he pulled out Heaven Splitter and declared proudly, "Do you think that these random nobodies can stop me?" Chapter 995. Kill them all. Chapter 995. Kill them all. This was the first time that sword sect cultivators were viewed as nobodies. Clang! The saber quivered and 6 resplendent dermic patterns burst forth. It's a connate dermic weapon. Cries of surprises came from the crowd. Su Zimo swung his saber and slashed forward. The entire saber extended and descended from the skies like a gigantic heavenly saber, striking the crowd of sword cultivators. The aura of that slash was way too strong, as though it wanted to split the world apart. The expressions of many sword cultivators changed as they defended with their swords. Boom! Heaven Splitter descended and collided with the swords of many sword cultivators, causing the ground to quake with a loud bang. A sword cultivator could not withstand the terrifying power of Heaven Splitter and was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood with a dispirited expression. A terrifying power surged into that person's body and destroyed his life force completely. Ha ha! Su Zimo burst into laughter and passed through the crowd. Kill! The remaining sword cultivators attacked one after another and roared. Instantly, the entire battlefield was filled with sword chi that tore the void into pieces and engulfed Su Zimo. Raging tides. Su Zimo slashed with his backhand and the sound of a tsunami suddenly sounded from his saber. It was getting louder and louder. The moment the saber landed, the entire battlefield was surrounded by a vast ocean that was dark and bottomless, surging with seawater. Countless raging tides rose from the ground and engulfed many sword cultivators around them. Saber intent. More than 10 sword cultivators were caught in Su Zimo's saber intent and could barely fend for themselves, let alone stop him. When Dao being Li Quan caught sight of that, his heart skipped a beat. A green shadow flashed and Su Zimo was already close. You! He only had time to say a single word before Su Zimo's Heaven Splitter slashed down at him. I've already said that these nobodies won't be able to stop me. Dao being Li Quan channeled his blood chi and channeled his dermic powers to deflect the Heaven Splitter. Clang! An ear-piercing sound echoed and sparks flew. Among all the sword cultivators of Sword Sect, Dao being Li Quan was the strongest. However, he still felt his arms go numb after receiving Su Zimo's slash. His blood chi churned and he almost vomited. How terrifying! Some legends about Su Zimo surfaced in Dao being Li Quan's mind. Legend has it that this person has the bloodline of the demon race flowing within him which can't be used in this Dao inheritance ground. He's already so strong with just his physique. If he could activate his bloodline, I might not even be able to defend against a single slash. Just as Dao being Li Quan was letting his imagination run wild, Su Zimo's second slash arrived. Take my slash. Swoosh. The sound of a tsunami could be heard. It was as though the saber had split the incoming waves into two as it surged against the current with a shuddering burst power. Clang! The saber and sword collided and Dao being Li Quan shuddered. He could no longer defend against it and staggered back repeatedly. The blood on his face faded and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. 2 slashes. He was already injured. However, this was only the beginning. With Dao being Li Quan injured, the formation came to a standstill and its power decreased. Dugu Jian, who had been dodging, seized the opportunity and attacked suddenly. A peerless sword beam tore through the skies. It was too fast. Apart from Su Zimo, no one else saw how Dugu Jian attacked. When the stunning sword beam entered the glabella of a sword cultivator, the sound of a sword being unsheathed could be heard on the battlefield. A streak of blood seeped out from the sword cultivator's glabellach. His life force decreased rapidly. That person's consciousness had already been pierced by Dugu Jian's sword chi and his essence spirit was destroyed. One of the 7 sword cultivators was down. The 7 luminary sword formation was broken. Everyone, join forces and kill this demon. One of the sword cultivators glared at Su Zimo with bloodshot eyes, wanting nothing more than to skin him alive. Nearly 20 sword cultivators swarmed forward. Humph! Su Zimo swung his saber and slashed through the air. Blood chi filled the air and a gigantic purgatory appeared on the battlefield, engulfing all 20 sword cultivators. It was not as though Su Zimo had gained nothing from cultivating in seclusion for a month in the cave abode of that mountain. At the very least, he had benefited immensely in the Tao of the saber. With the help of the words left behind by Yen Beichen, He managed to comprehend the terrifying Asura saber intent. Although he had not spent much time with Yen Beichen, the latter's attainments in the Tao of the saber were extremely deep. With a series of pointers, Su Zimo resolved many of his questions on the Tao of the saber. His saber techniques became purer and his saber intent became more condensed. Su Zimo swung his saber and slashed out multiple saber shadows. The sounds of ghosts wailing and wolves howling could be heard from the battlefield, causing one's mind to waver. Cultivators with weaker wills would have their minds broken. The moment a sword cultivator's mind wavered, Su Zimo seized the opening and killed him with a single slash. Blood flowed like rivers in the purgatory. Within the viscous river of blood, malevolent skeletons crawled up one after another and attacked the sword cultivators present. This was not an illusion. That was a product of saber intent, and every single skeleton was condensed from dermic powers with immense strength. After falling into the white bone purgatory, the sword cultivators of Sword Sect were all separated and had to fend for themselves. Coupled with a terrifying sword cultivator like Dugu Jian by his side, sword cultivators of Sword Sect were dying continuously. In the blink of an eye, there were only 10 Sword Sect cultivators left. When Dao Being Li Quan saw how dangerous the situation was and how they were going to die if things dragged on, a vicious glint flashed through his eyes. He conjured a few extremely mysterious dermic arts and bit his tongue gently, spitting out a mouthful of essence blood. Burn! The essence blood burned instantly. At the same time, Dao Being Li Quan's aura surged and turned extremely sharp as he slashed towards the purgatory beside him. Boom! The purgatory shook and came to a sudden collapse. Su Zimo could see the reality behind Dao Being Li Quan's actions and said indifferently, "If you release a secret skill as such that burns your essence spirit, you will be stuck at the void reversion realm for the rest of your life." Dao Being Li Quan and the others escaped and sped into the distance immediately. He turned around and glared at Su Zimo with a venomous expression. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Su Zimo, at least we can return alive. As for you, you will be buried here. You can forget about getting out alive now that you entered this place. Su Zimo, there are countless experts here who want to take your life. Ha 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 ha. You said something wrong." Su Zimo shook his head slightly and replied nonchalantly, "You guys can't escape." Before he finished his sentence, Su Zimo flicked his fingers like a sword and slashed gently in the direction where Dao Being Li Quan was escaping towards. Chi! A white sword beam burst forth from Su Zimo's fingertip and arrived before Dao Being Li Quan almost instantly. The 10 sword cultivators turned around one after another and defended with their swords. Only Dao Being Li Quan's expression changed and his pupils constricted. He could smell the aura of death from that sword chi. Poof! The sword chi sliced through the swords of the 10 sword cultivators without any obstruction and entered their bodies. Terrifying killing intent burst forth and surged into their spirit platforms, killing their essence spirits instantly. All 10 swords were broken. 10 sword cultivators were cleaved into 2 by the sword chi and blood splattered in the void. Innards rolled out and a stench filled the air. There was dead silence beneath the gigantic sword. When the surrounding cultivators saw that, their eyes widened and they felt chills run down their spines. The might of the heaven-slaying sword art was extremely terrifying. Chapter 996, Dao Being Glass. Chapter 996, Dao Being Glass. The dust had settled. Dugu Jian looked at Su Zimo and nodded without saying anything. He was silent and introverted. The fact that he didn't act as such was to express his gratitude to Su Zimo. Su Zimo understood and smiled. On the one hand, he attacked because of Dugu Jian. On the other hand, it was also because the 7 perfected void reversion cultivators of Sword Sect were here for him to begin with. By killing these sword cultivators now, he could prevent any unforeseen events from happening in the future and would not have to worry. Dugu Jian ignored the storage bags dropped by the Sword Sect cultivators and walked towards the bottom of the gigantic sword. Raising his head, his initially empty eyes gradually turned fervent. Gradually, a hint of life appeared in his lonely eyes. Unlike the other cultivators, Dugu Jian did not establish any Dao heart and merely looked at the gigantic sword before him in a daze. That gaze was pure. In Dugu Jian's eyes, there was nothing else apart from the Dao of the sword. Without the need to shout, all the cultivators present could sense Dugu Jian's Dao heart. It was just a sword. Swoosh! Suddenly, a terrifying storm appeared around the gigantic sword, connecting heaven and earth with a terrifying might. The most shocking thing was that an extremely sharp sword chi burst forth from the storm and minced the surrounding void into pieces. A legacy phenomenon had appeared. The storm howled and swept Dugu Jian into it, disappearing from everyone's sight. Su Zimo waited for Dugu Jian to disappear before collecting the storage bags that the sword sect cultivators dropped on the ground. While there might not be top-grade treasures in those storage bags, there would definitely be quite a number of elixir consumables. The surrounding cultivators did not disperse. They stood in the distance and looked at Su Zimo with complicated expressions. There was excitement, caution, hostility, and fear. The Dao Inheritance Ground was not a super big place. Before long, the news of this battle would spread through the entire Dao Inheritance Ground and everyone would know that he had entered. At that time, the test for him would truly begin. Su Zimo did not want to fight Di Yin so quickly. Even though he had entered the Dao Inheritance Ground, he knew his limits. His scarlet-haired Yin spirit and bloodline were restricted and his chances of winning against Di Yin were extremely low. Therefore, he intended to head to the Three Tribulations domain first, and it would be best if he managed to obtain the legacies he wanted. Although he could not break through to the Void Reversion Realm, his combat strength would increase as well. In a flash, Su Zimo activated his lightning escape and turned into a bolt of purple lightning, speeding into the distance. Su Zimo's gone. Hurry up and follow him. There's definitely going to be a show. Many cultivators set off in hot pursuit. Although Su Zimo's cultivation realm was low, the power of the black-haired essence spirit was no weaker than a void reversion. Coupled with the lightning escape technique, there were few cultivators who could keep up with him. Even so, there were some void reversions who specialized in tracking that managed to stay on his tail. Su Zimo frowned slightly. He did not want to expose his tracks too early. Suddenly, a pair of gigantic wings made of dermic powers appeared on his back. His wings flapped and his speed increased. Shoo! The purple lightning tore through the air and disappeared before everyone's eyes. Throwing off the cultivators behind him, Su Zimo sprinted in the direction of the Three Tribulations domain. He did not stop for any legacies he saw along the way and sped off. A day later, Su Zimo gradually slowed down and consumed elixirs to recover his stamina as he traveled. Before long, a golden beam of light suddenly flew over from the skies behind him at an astonishing speed. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Even with his lightning escape technique coupled with ethereal wings, that was the fastest he could go. This was the first top-tier expert he had seen since entering the Dao Inheritance Ground. The golden light swept past his head and sped into the distance without stopping. Not long after, the golden light stopped and revealed the figure of a cultivator. Wearing a long robe that shone golden. He was tall and had long hair that draped over his shoulders. The golden-robed cultivator turned around and smiled at Su Zimo, asking, "Fellow Taoist, have you seen a bolt of purple lightning pass by here?" Su Zimo swept his gaze across the man's sleeves. Glass Palace's emblem. Just as Extreme Fire and the others had expected, other than Chaos Essence Sect, Sword Sect, Heavenly Dipper Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace, there were indeed other super sects that sent experts in. When the golden-robed cultivator saw Su Zimo's appearance, he was slightly stunned as well. After checking Su Zimo's cultivation realm, the golden-robed cultivator retracted his smile slowly and narrowed his eyes with a cold glint. Needless to say, he had already guessed Su Zimo's identity. The two of them were less than 30 feet apart and stood facing one another. They were expressionless and motionless. Both of them were tense as they searched for the other party's weakness. Killing intent filled the air. A great battle could break out at any moment. "If I'm not wrong, you must be Su Zimo, right?" In that tense atmosphere, the golden-robed cultivator was the first to speak and asked slowly, easing the killing intent between them. Su Zimo asked, "Who are you?" "My Dao title is..." The golden-robed cultivator paused for a moment before saying softly, "Glass." His Dao name was Glass. He was a titular disciple. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. To think that the first titular disciple he encountered upon entering the place was from Glass Palace. Boom! The split-second Su Zimo was mentally distracted. Dao Being Glass's eyes lit up and he suddenly attacked. He grasped the timing with perfect precision. A distance of 30 feet was instantly covered. Glass Palace was one of the strongest body-tempering sects in the cultivation world. It was extremely famous and was on par with Overlord Palace and Diamond Monastery. Glass Palace cultivators were strong in melee combat and could even fight against demon beasts. Dao Being Glass was even more terrifying in this aspect. Splash! Su Zimo only felt a golden light spread before his eyes and his blood chi surged as the sound of tsunamis rang in his ears. Dao Being Glass had already cultivated his bloodline to the tsunami blood realm. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had not met more than 5 people who could cultivate their bloodline to this level. Dao Being Glass's punch surged with his bloodline and shone brightly like a blazing sun, releasing a scorching and violent aura. A true expert. Su Zimo was completely disadvantaged with a single move. He had been slightly distracted and lost the initiative. Now that Dao Being Glass was right in front of him, he did not even have the chance to touch his storage bag and summon Heaven's Splitter. Raising his right hand, Su Zimo clenched it into a fist and punched towards Dao Being Glass's fist. The two fists collided. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Both of them shuddered. Su Zimo took half a step back and his expression changed slightly. Although his right hand was fine with the divine phoenix bone, his entire right arm was numb. It was clear how great the blow he received was. He could not activate his bloodline. Even with the help of the divine phoenix bone in his right hand, he could not defend against Dao Being Glass's power. Dao Being Glass's pupils constricted as well. He had already heard that Su Zimo's demon bloodline would be suppressed upon entering the Dao inheritance ground and his combat strength would be greatly reduced. Even so, he did not expect himself to not possess an absolute advantage despite him taking the initiative. Chapter 997. Powerful Counterattack. Chapter 997. Powerful Counterattack. Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness all year round and his body was tempered by lightning and dragon blood. It was no weaker than any divine weapon. Even without using his bloodline, there were very few titular disciples who could defeat him physically. This was the Dao inheritance ground. If not for the suppression of the wills of many ancient mighty figures, Su Zimo would have been able to gain the upper hand instantly by releasing his blood chi and counterattacking with all his might. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, even the God Race leader was suppressed by Su Zimo. It was clear how terrifying his body was. It was precisely because DE knew all of this that he chose the venue of the challenge to be the Dao inheritance ground. Both parties clashed head-on. Su Zimo took half a step back and was disadvantaged. As a titular disciple, Dao Being Glass naturally did not give Su Zimo any time to catch his breath. He strode forward and swung his fist down viciously. Splash! His bloodline surged and his fist shone with a bedazzling rainbow luster. He had already pushed his strength to its limits. The two of them were extremely close to one another, and it was already impossible for Su Zimo to draw his saber. Dao Being Glass was good at melee combat and would not give him the chance. Su Zimo propped up both arms and welcomed Dao Being Glass's punch. Bang! Another loud bang shook the ground. Both parties were merely clashing physically in melee combat, but the impact was even greater than the clash of dermic arts. Not to mention the nearby cultivators. Even the cultivators in the distance were starting to notice the commotion and sped over. The rainbow-colored glass light on Dao Being Glass's fist shattered and spilled in all directions, illuminating the entire firmament in an unfathomable manner. Su Zimo retreated once more. This clash caused both his arms to feel numb and sore. If he could use his blood chi, he merely had to circulate his bloodline and that feeling would vanish instantly without affecting him at all. However, it was not possible in the Dao inheritance ground. Dao Being Glass's eyes flashed with mockery. Su Zimo, I have to admit that you're indeed strong and have unlimited potential. Dao Being Glass said slowly, however, you've challenged the dignity of Glass Palace time and time again. Do you really think that Glass Palace can be bullied like that? Look, it's the titular disciple of Glass Palace. Who's the one on the other end? The #1 perfected lord, Su Zimo. Heavens, Su Zimo was ambushed by a titular disciple so quickly. From the looks of it, he will be killed before he even gets to meet Dean. More and more cultivators gathered over and discussed loudly. Dao Being Glass's tone was aggressive and his actions did not stop. With a loud shout, he lunged forward and hugged the air in front of his chest with both hands. His blood chi surged and he smashed down towards Su Zimo as though he was moving a gigantic mountain. Mountain-hugging fist. A huge shadow shrouded over and the pressure was suffocating. Unable to dodge, Su Zimo could only stretch out his arms once more to defend by propping up his arms. Boom! This collision between flesh and bones was even more intense than a collision between metal. How were those bodies of flesh? The two of them were humanoid weapons. Many cultivators widened their mouths in shock. Bang! 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 Dao Being Glass relied on his surging blood chi and melee combat techniques to suppress Su Zimo constantly without giving him any chance to catch his breath. Su Zimo retreated continuously with a grim expression. A void reversion Dao Being lamented, as expected of the #1 monster incarnate in history. There's a major realm difference between the two of them and he can't use his bloodline. Yet, he managed to last so long against Dao Being Glass. However, the outcome is the same. Another person shook his head. If this continues, Su Zimo won't be able to hold on for long. Among the surrounding cultivators, there was no lack of people with experience. They were right. Su Zimo's arms were not the only ones that suffered consecutive head-on collisions with Dao Being Glass. At that moment, even his organs were shaken. If he continued fighting, he would definitely lose and might even die from the shock. As expected of a titular disciple, Dao Being Glass is able to attack in succession and maintain pressure in melee combat. No matter how many dermic arts Su Zimo has, he won't be able to release them in time. Su Zimo has lost the initiative. It's even harder than ascending the heavens if he wants to salvage the situation against Dao Being Glass. Melee combat was extremely dangerous. Speed was of essence to both parties. If Su Zimo wanted to release dermic arts, he had to execute dermic seals. However, that short period of time was enough for Dao Being Glass to kill him. All of a sudden, a flawless jade green lotus platform suddenly flew out from Su Zimo's glabella and smashed towards Dao Being Glass. Destiny Dermic Weapon. Creation Green Lotus. The dermic weapon was not in his storage bag and Su Zimo only needed a single thought to send it out of his consciousness to kill his opponent. Fufu, I've long expected this. Dao Being Glass was not surprised at all. A rainbow beam of light shot out from his glabella and crashed towards the incoming creation Green Lotus. It's the Rainbow Glass Pagoda. Ah, the Rainbow Glass Pagoda is also one of the top-grade Khanate dermic weapons. I heard that it's extremely mysterious and has many dermic arts that can be used for both offense and defense. A series of exclamations came from the crowd. Grade 5 Creation Green Lotus. Rainbow Glass Pagoda. The two dermic weapons collided with a deafening bang. With the two dermic weapons as the center, ripples of energy spread out one after another. Rainbow divine lights and green rays of light devoured one another and collided wildly. The surrounding cultivators only saw a blinding flash of light in front of them and instinctively closed their eyes. The two dermic weapons collided in midair and paused for a moment before separating, transforming into a rainbow divine light and a green beam that fell to both sides. It was an even split. That's all you have. Dao Being Glass smirked and was about to mock him when Su Zimo suddenly roared. Kill! Boom! It was as though thunder boomed in Dao Being Glass's ears. He shuddered. This was also because his physique was strong and he possessed tsunami blood. Despite being struck head-on by Thunderclap Kill, he was not injured and was merely stunned for a moment. If it was any other cultivator, they would have been severely injured or even killed by Su Zimo's roar at this distance. Sound Domain Secret Skill. Su Zimo was suppressed by Dao Being Glass in melee combat, and could not even use any dermic arts or secret skills. However, Sound Domain secret skills were instantaneous. Making use of the collision between the Creation Green Lotus and the Rainbow Glass Pagoda, Su Zimo released his Sound Domain secret skill and counterattacked forcefully. Apart from the Sound Domain secret skill, he had another instantaneous secret skill. Visual technique. Although the Illumination Dragon Eye was unable to be activated in the Dao Inheritance Ground, Su Zimo could release the Illumination Sword formation. The 36 flying swords formed by the Illumination Stone were hidden in his right eye. At the same time that the Sound Domain secret skill was released, the 36 flying swords shot out from Su Zimo's right eye and stabbed towards Dao Being Glass's face. Dao Being Glass had already forced Su Zimo to use all his trump cards without holding anything back. Chapter 998, Savage. Chapter 998, Savage. Glass Eye. Dao Being Glass reacted and released his eye technique as well. Instantly, his eyes shone with a mysterious luster, resembling two sparkling gems that were brighter than the stars in the night sky. Two rainbow divine lights burst forth from his eyes and enveloped the 36 incoming flying swords. The 36 flying swords traveled through the rainbow divine lights at a slower speed, as though they were stuck in a swamp and could not move an inch. The might of the glass divine light was shocking, and even superior-grade dermic weapons would be turned into scrap metal instantly if they were enveloped by it. Although the 36 flying swords were not dermic weapons, they were conjured by the Illumination Stone. Even Dharma characteristic Dao Lords would not be able to corrode the Illumination Stone, let alone the glass divine light conjured by a void reversion. Su Zimo controlled his thoughts. The 36 flying swords stopped in their tracks and suddenly retreated. Rushing through the air, the sword scars left behind formed a terrifying sword formation. Clang! Clang! The Illumination Sword formation took shape and smashed forward viciously. Shing! The rainbow divine light was broken by the Illumination Sword formation, and the sword chi was extremely sharp. Suddenly, it exploded and entered Dao Being Glass's eyes. Ah! Dao Being Glass shrieked in pain at the sudden change. Fresh blood oozed from his eyes and he was blinded. The crowd fell into an uproar. Earlier on, Su Zimo was completely suppressed by Dao Being Glass. Nobody expected him to turn the tides in the blink of an eye. There was no way Su Zimo would let such an opportunity slip by as the Illumination Sword formation continued crushing towards Dao Being Glass's head. Let the body be like glass, transparent inside out and cleansed of impurities, turning indestructible. Although Dao Being Glass was blind, he calmed down immediately and chanted the mantra of the Glass Heart Sutra. Suddenly, a powerful force burst forth. Suddenly, his body was shrouded by a mysterious glow that was like glass, flawless and indestructible. Clang! The moment everything was completed, the Illumination Sword formation slashed down with an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Dao Being Glass's head was still intact against the sharpness of the Illumination Sword formation. What was even more frightening was that the Illumination Sword formation was instantly destroyed by the rebound and could no longer be condensed. Even though he was blind, Dao Being Glass's combat strength was still extremely terrifying. However, after that exchange, Dao Being Glass's advantage was gone and Su Zimo gained the upper hand. Glass, you've lost. Su Zimo hollered and strode forward with a torrential aura. Extending his palm, he slapped Dao Being Glass's head. 1,000-ton finger. Dao Being Glass extended a finger and dermic powers gushed out. His entire finger seemed to have turned into jade as it pierced towards Su Zimo's chest with immense strength. At the same time, his glabella shone and released a rainbow-colored spirit consciousness beam that pierced towards Su Zimo's glabella. It was an essence spirit secret skill. Even though Dao Being Glass was blinded, he could still battle by relying on his spirit consciousness. But now, even his essence spirit secret skill was released. It was clear that Dao Being Glass was in a frenzy and was willing to risk everything to kill Su Zimo. This is the true trump card of a void reversion. This is the difference of a single move. If Dao Being Glass had released his essence spirit secret skill earlier, he wouldn't have ended up in such a state. Now that he has even released his essence spirit secret skill, the outcome of this battle is about to be decided. Just as the crowd was discussing, Su Zimo's left wrist suddenly released a sacred Buddhist light that enveloped him. Mingwang prayer beads. The rainbow-colored glass beam struck the Buddha light. After a brief pause, the Buddhist light shattered. Of course, most of the power of the essence spirit secret skill was blocked by the Buddhist light as well. The remnant spirit consciousness surged into Su Zimo's consciousness and was sliced into pieces by the creation green lotus seeds, turning into nothingness. It's an essence spirit dermic weapon. What essence spirit dermic weapon can defend against a single essence spirit secret skill from a titular disciple? Su Zimo indeed possesses treasures from head to toe. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo's left wrist with burning gazes. At that moment, Su Zimo was even more shocked. Back at the Thousand Crane Tea Party, even when the 5 void reversions joined forces and released their essence spirit secret skills, they could not injure him at all. But now, a single essence spirit secret skill was enough to shatter the barrier formed by the Ming Wang prayer beads. If another essence spirit secret skill of the same power was used, it would be enough to threaten his essence spirit. This was the power of a titular disciple's spirit consciousness. If not for the Ming Wang prayer beads and the creation green lotus seeds, he would have been killed with a single move. That was his greatest weakness right now. Without cultivating to void reversion realm, one could not condense an essence spirit secret skill and could only defend passively. Su Zimo was shocked. At that moment, Dao being glass was astounded. That essence spirit secret skill was a secret skill exclusive to Glass Palace and was extremely ferocious. Even void reversions of the same realm could be killed by it with ease, let alone a nascent soul. The reason why Dao being glass did not escape right away despite being blinded was because he wanted to kill Su Zimo with this essence spirit secret skill. Even if he could not kill Su Zimo on the spot, he wanted to injure the latter severely. However, he had not expected that Su Zimo would receive his essence spirit secret skill and come out fine and dandy. At this point of the battle, Dao being glass harbored thoughts of retreating. However, Su Zimo would not give him the chance to escape. Dao being glass's 1,000-ton finger had already closed in. Su Zimo's eyes lit up as he clenched his right fist and clashed against the 1,000-ton finger. At the same time, he extended his left hand and placed it on Dao being glass's arm in a seemingly soft manner with a coil and a tremble. Bang! First, their fist and finger collided with a dull sound of defeat. Although Su Zimo's right hand managed to defend against the 1,000-ton finger, it was already mangled. If not for the divine phoenix bone, that palm might have been shattered by a single finger strike. This was the terror of a titular disciple. A centipede dies but never falls completely. Even if Dao being glass was blinded, the power he released was enough to threaten Su Zimo's life. The slightest mistake would result in death. After stabbing with the 1,000-ton finger, Dao being glass wanted to turn around and retreat. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo's left hand was already on his arm that he could not retract in time. A tremendous amount of power burst forth. His arm seemed to be twisted and torn by that power. Poof! The flesh on his arm exploded into a blood mist. Ah! Dao being glass could not help but let out another tragic cry. He felt as though his bones were about to be crushed by that strange power. Before he could react, Su Zimo grabbed his arm with both hands and lifted him up, swinging him in an arc in midair before smashing him into the ground. Boom! The ground quaked. Many cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat as their eyes twitched. Boom! Before anyone could react, Su Zimo grabbed Dao being glass's arm and pulled him out of the pit once more, smashing him to the other side. The cultivators widened their eyes in shock. To think that a titular disciple of Glass Palace would be reduced to such a state where he could not retaliate at all. Chapter 999. Slaying Glass. Chapter 999. Slaying Glass. Bang! 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 Su Zimo swung Dao being glass's body and smashed it around, creating a gigantic human-shaped pit on the ground with every single smash. Sand and stone flew everywhere as mud churned. Many cultivators felt their teeth ache at the sight of it. If it was them, their bodies would have been smashed into minced meat after a few smashes. But now, Dao being glass's body was still intact. However, it was battered and riddled with wounds. Su Zimo threw Dao being glass on the ground casually and strode forward, stomping down on his chest. Snap! Dao being glass's chest caved in slightly and his bones snapped. If it was any other body-tempered void refinement, Su Zimo's stomp would have penetrated his chest. However, Dao being glass was not fatally injured still. Instead, his tendons and bones were almost shattered by Su Zimo and he could not retaliate. Glass Palace is nothing much. Su Zimo looked down at Dao being glass and said coldly, even a titular disciple will have to be trampled beneath my feet. Foo-foo. Cough, cough. Dao being glass coughed out blood and faced Su Zimo with his already blind eyes, panting. Su Zimo, let me go. There's still room for reconciliation between us. At this point, Dao being glass could no longer care about his dignity. Even though he knew that countless cultivators were watching him, he could only bow his head and beg for mercy in order to survive. Su Zimo's gaze was cold and he was unmoved as he shook his head. The road to reconciliation between us has long been closed. When Glass Palace vented their anger on the mortals of the 13 cities of Yen country, Su Zimo was already at odds with Glass Palace. Furthermore, because of this, Su Hong passed away out of grief. Dao being Xian Yu had even crippled Su Zimo and forced him into the Dragon Burial Valley. Ever since then, Glass Palace had not given up on pursuing Su Zimo. Now that Su Zimo was in the Middle Continent, Glass Palace even sent their titular disciple to hunt him down. How were they going to reconcile after everything? How? Between Su Zimo and Glass Palace, only one side could survive. Of course, even the current Su Zimo was not qualified to go against Glass Palace. However, that would not stop him from trampling on Glass Palace's reputation and killing Dao being glass right here. Sensing Su Zimo's determination, Dao being glass suddenly turned flustered and grit his teeth. Su Zimo, I'm a titular disciple of Glass Palace. If you dare kill a titular disciple, you will bring about deep troubles that you will not be able to handle. Deep troubles. A mocking look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he sneered, even if I pierce through the heavens, I have nothing to fear. Since I dare to come here, I'll kill all titular disciples I face. The cultivators were shocked. Kill all the titular disciples he faced. No one in history had ever dared to dream about something like that, let alone say it. The moment he said that, Su Zimo swiped his storage bag and took out a grayish-black mountain. One of the 7 unique treasures, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Your body is strong. Su Zimo said murderously, let's see how strong it can be. The Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded in Su Zimo's palm and blotted out the skies, forming a massive shadow above Dao being glass's head before crashing down. Boom! The Mystic Magnet Mountain smashed violently into Dao being glass. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of bones cracking could be heard and it was chilling. Without even looking, all the cultivators knew that Dao being glass's body was completely crippled. Shoo! Before the Mystic Magnet Mountain descended, a small golden humanoid had already escaped from Dao being glass's head at an extremely fast speed. It was his essence spirit. Unless it was absolutely necessary, cultivators would not abandon their bodies, let alone a body as strong as Dao being glass's. But now he was cornered. Su Zimo, I'll definitely take revenge for today. Dao being glass's essence spirit sped into the distance. Without his physical body, his essence spirit was extremely fast. He believed that Su Zimo would not be able to catch up with him given his speed. Su Zimo stood on the spot motionlessly. It was true that he could not catch up to Dao being glass's essence spirit with merely lightning escape and ethereal wings. However, there was no need for him to chase after it. Su Zimo conjured hand seals with both hands and looked at Dao being glass's essence spirit. His eyes seemed to be burning with flames as he hollered softly, "Rise!" Suddenly, a wall of flames rose from the ground far away, emitting a scorching heat wave that blocked Dao being glass's path. Ah! Dao being glass's essence spirit shrieked and hurriedly stopped. He was fleeting at an extremely fast speed and almost smashed into it. If he had a physical body, he could have charged right through it. The power of that wall of flames would not have been able to injure him. But now, he was only left with his essence spirit. His essence spirit could feel waves of scorching pain from the heat wave of the wall of flames and its glow dimmed significantly. Once they made contact, it would definitely be incinerated. Dao being glass's essence spirit stopped in its tracks and wanted to escape. However, Su Zimo would not give him another chance. Transform! Su Zimo hollered softly. Under countless gazes, the flames of the wall of flames gathered, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a gigantic python with wings and flames burning all over its body. It was extremely ferocious. Primordial divine beast, soaring serpent. This transformation was breathtaking. Legend has it that Tao Lord Extreme Fire was once the #1 in controlling fire. Seems like Su Zimo has already obtained his true inheritance. He should be in mighty figure Extreme Fire right now. That person's mastery of fire has already reached perfection. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. The primordial soaring serpent flapped its wings and flew forward. Its massive body enveloped the head of Tao Being Glass's essence spirit with a ferocious gaze. Tao Being Glass shrieked and turned to flee. The primordial soaring serpent opened its mouth and spat out a ball of blazing flames. Countless flames rained down from the skies and engulfed Tao Being Glass's essence spirit. Tao Being Glass's essence spirit blazed with the raging flames. He struggled relentlessly in midair, but the flames on his body did not extinguish. The primordial soaring serpent glided over and devoured Tao Being Glass's essence spirit with its mouth wide open. The tragic cries stopped abruptly. The titular disciple of Glass Palace had fallen in the Tao inheritance ground. When they saw that, the cultivators remained silent for a long time with shock in their eyes. That was a titular disciple. They were considered as the strongest disciples of the various supersects who could kill existences above their level. Their future potentials were limitless. Everyone looked up to them. But now, a title disciple was still killed mercilessly by another cultivator. Furthermore, he was killed by a nascent soul. Is this the #1 monster incarnate of history? If this person grows up, who can stop him in the future? He probably won't have the chance to grow anymore. You have to know that there are a few more titular disciples waiting for him in the Tao inheritance ground. Also, don't forget that there's Tao Being Dean of Chaos Essence Sect. Chapter 1000. Walking into a Trap. Chapter 1000. Walking into a Trap. After killing Tao Being Glass, Su Zimo's expression was grim and his heart stirred. Although this battle was short, it was extremely dangerous and was even more difficult than he had imagined. Tao Being Glass had almost forced out all his trump cards. He had relied on the Sound Domain secret skill, eye technique and top-grade dermic weapons such as the Creation Green Lotus and Mingwang Prayer Beads to barely win. Su Zimo took out some external medicine and sprinkled it on his mangled right hand. If not for the divine phoenix bone, his right hand would have been shattered long ago. At that time, he might not have been the winner as well. Under normal circumstances, given Su Zimo's physique's regeneration capabilities, the injury on his right hand should recover completely before long. However, his blood chi was suppressed and his regeneration capabilities were greatly reduced as well. He had no choice but to make use of some spirit herbs as supplements. The impact of the Tao inheritance ground on him was way too great. Su Zimo had not seen Di since they were at the Myriad Phenomenon City. However, he believed that Di Yin's strength was definitely above Tao Being Glass's. Even the physique and melee combat that Tao Being Glass was proudest of could not be compared to Di Yin. In that case, he had almost no chance of winning against Di Yin. Di Yin aside, the combat strength between the titular disciples was similar. If there was an additional titular disciple present, there was a high chance that he would have been the one who died. I have to reach the Three Tribulations domain as soon as possible. Su Zimo felt a sense of danger and felt uneasy. It came like an adrenaline rush. He put away Tao Being Glass's storage bag and summoned the Creation Green Lotus. At the same time, he held the Rainbow Glass Pagoda in his palm and examined it for a moment. The Rainbow Glass Pagoda was a rare treasure to be able to fight against a Grade 5 Creation Green Lotus head-on without being disadvantaged. Unfortunately, that was Tao Being Glass's destiny dermic weapon. Although he was already dead, the spirit consciousness imprint on the destiny dermic weapon was still present. Su Zimo tried controlling it, but there was no reaction. He had to erase the spirit consciousness imprint on it before he could turn the Rainbow Glass Pagoda into his own. This required a long time. Su Zimo did not have the time for that in the Tao inheritance ground. He placed the rainbow glass pagoda in his storage bag and sped through the crowd. The cultivators that were initially gathered there gradually dispersed. Before long, a streak of lightning flashed in the distance and arrived with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it had already descended. The person wore a dermic robe and his body shone with crackling green lightning. His entire appearance was drowned by the lightning and was blurred. He wore a Dao crown on his head, cloud ascension boots and a purple gold belt around his waist as he looked around with a dignified expression. The sleeves of that person's robes were embroidered with the emblem of Zephyr Thunder Palace. Dong! Right then, a strange sound echoed from afar, as though it could disrupt a cultivator's mind and bloodline. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the distant horizon with a wooden fish in his hands and walked over step by step. Dong! The wooden fish sounded again. Although that person seemed to be extremely slow, he was already right in front of them the second time the wooden fish sounded. Bald head and monk robes. Monk Formless, you're here too. The cultivator who was covered in green lightning greeted the approaching monk. Patron Zephyr Thunder, how have you been? The monk holding the wooden fish lowered his gaze with a calm expression. If any other cultivator heard those words, they would definitely be shocked. The two titular disciples of Formless Monastery and Zephyr Thunder Palace were gathered here. Suddenly, both of their expressions changed and they looked over in unison. Right now it was daytime. However, stars appeared in the distant firmaments one after another in a bedazzling manner. A figure strode over from beneath the starry skies. He wore a dark golden Taoist robe and was bathed in starlight. His eyes were brighter than the stars in the skies and he had a faint smile on his face. Looking at the newcomer, Dao being Zephyr Thunder remarked indifferently, to think that the battle between Glass and Su Zimo would alarm even you, Dao being Heavenly Dipper. The incomer was the titular disciple of Heavenly Dipper sect. Unfortunately, you guys are already too late. Foo-foo. Hee. Suddenly, a burst of laughter sounded from the void. The sound was erratic and it was hard to tell if it was male or female. The strange thing was that this place was vast and spacious. Apart from the three of them, no other figure could be seen. The expressions of the three titular disciples present were unchanged, as though they had already sensed it. You're here for him too? Dao being Zephyr Thunder asked with a frown. Why? You don't want me to interfere? The voice asked instead mockingly. Glass was the one who wanted to show off and tried to kill Su Zimo alone. In the end he died. Is he really that strong? A playful look flashed through Dao being Heavenly Dipper's eyes as he asked with a smile. I heard that he's only at the nascent soul realm. He's very strong. Monk Formless suddenly spoke. If not for the fact that his demonic methods are suppressed in the Dao inheritance ground, none of us would be his match. Not necessarily. Dao being Heavenly Dipper shook his head and chuckled. As titular disciples, all of them were proud and arrogant. Furthermore, he had fought the Asura Yen Baichen to a draw previously. Formless words are not unreasonable. Dao being Zephyr Thunder said in a deep voice, if that's not the case, why did Di Yin choose this battlefield? That question silenced everyone instantly. There was only a single explanation for Di Yin's choice. Even he was wary of Su Zimo in his peak condition. The reason why he chose the Dao inheritance ground was to restrict Su Zimo's combat strength. After a long silence, Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled and said to the void, even if that's the case, the combined strength of me, Zephyr Thunder and Formless is enough. No matter how strong Su Zimo is, he won't be able to escape death. Is that so? The erratic voice sounded once more. I've received news that 3 titular disciples of the Fiend sects have entered the Dao inheritance ground. One of them happens to be Su Zimo's best friend. If she joins forces with Su Zimo, it won't be difficult for her to help him escape even if she can't defeat the 3 of you. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 2 fell silent. If Su Zimo had a titular disciple by his side, things would indeed be troublesome. Their goal was to kill Su Zimo, not defeat him. Don't worry, I don't want any of Su Zimo's treasures. What I want is his life. The voice in the void sounded with a chilling killing intent that sent chills down one's spine. All right. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 2 exchanged glances and nodded. He. Right then, a sinister laughter sounded from deep underground. Boom! With a loud bang, a pale white palm appeared from the depths of the ground. Sand and rocks scattered and mud churned as a figure burrowed out from the ground. Since that's the case, wouldn't it be safer to have me around? The person was dressed in black robes and was as skinny as a matchstick. His face was pale and his eyes were sunken, looking like a fiend from hell. Malevolent Earth. Tao being Zephyr Thunder frowned. Tao being Heavenly Dipper laughed. Su Zimo caused so many titular disciples to gather for his life. Seems like there's no doubt he's going to die. Where is that person now? How do we lure him out? Tao being Zephyr Thunder asked with a frown. The voice in the void sounded once more. This person is sentimental. I have a plan that can lure him into a trap. Chapter 1001. Without Hesitation. Chapter 1001. Without Hesitation. Su Zimo wanted to reach the Three Tribulations domain as soon as possible and sprinted without stopping. About 2 hours later, a gigantic frost region appeared on the distant horizon, connecting the heavens and the earth. Cold winds howled sharply within. A large number of cultivators lingered around the frost region. Every cultivator looked at the region in shock. Some of them had hesitant expressions, some of them stopped in their tracks, and some of them had already mustered their courage to charge in. However, the moment the person took half a step in, he let out a tragic cry and retreated. His thigh that took the step in was filled with injuries. However, the scariest thing was that the injuries had already frozen and not a single drop of blood flowed out. That person's leg was covered in frost and was frozen stiff. In the crowd, a cultivator sneered and pursed his lips. Humph, you're overestimating yourself. Do you really think that the extreme northeast wind is something that everybody can endure? Fellow Taoist, may I ask what's the background of the extreme northeast wind? A cultivator beside him asked. The person glanced at the cultivator beside him and cleared his throat before saying slowly, there are many unknown places in Tianhuang mainland. Legend has it that the extreme north is one of them. Bone-piercing cold winds have been blowing in that place for 10,000 years, and there are glaciers and snowy mountains everywhere. Even conjoint body mighty figures wouldn't dare to venture deep into that place. The extreme northeast wind is only the outermost wind of the extreme north region. Even so, it's shockingly powerful. You saw it for yourself just now. If that person had walked half a meter further, he would have died within. That's scary. The cultivator who asked the question felt his mouth cramp up and shuddered. The red lotus karma flame of the second stage is even more terrifying. It's triggered by a cultivator's own greed, anger and obsession and ignites from within their bodies, burning their flesh, bones, essence chi, dermic powers and even their essence spirits. It's so painful that they would wish they were dead. Throughout history, there have been countless paragons who died in the red lotus karma flame. I heard that no one has been able to pass through the Three Tribulations domain since ancient times. What? Nobody? According to the seniors of my sect, there are indeed people who can survive the tribulations of wind and fire. However, none of them can survive the lightning tribulation of the third stage. I heard that the final lightning tribulation is also known as the Tao Heart Lightning Tribulation. If one's Tao heart is unstable, a single lightning tribulation can crush them into pieces. Standing not far away, Su Zimo listened to the discussions of the surrounding cultivators and gained a better understanding of the Three Tribulations domain. He took a deep breath and headed towards the Three Tribulations domain. Have you heard? The titular disciple of Glass Palace, Tao being glass, fought against Su Zimo and died. To think that Su Zimo would be able to kill a titular disciple despite being suppressed so badly. He's truly the #1 monster incarnate in history. It's useless. That person won't live for long. I heard that the titular disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Formless Monastery and Heavenly Dipper sect are already prepared to join forces to kill him. What's the use of that? Su Zimo isn't a fool. If he knows that they're joining forces, he can just avoid them. Fufu, you don't know about that, do you? The cultivator laughed. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect has already entered the Tao inheritance ground. She's close friends with Su Zimo and wanted to help him. However, she was captured by those 3 titular disciples who are waiting for him to walk right into their trap. Su Zimo had just arrived at the borders of the Three Tribulations domain, and could not help but stop in his tracks when he heard the discussions. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect who is a close friend of mine. Could it be? Su Zimo frowned. He was already doomed for coming to the Dao inheritance ground to accept the challenge. At this moment, anyone who dared to stand out and help him would definitely be in danger of dying. No matter how he thought about it, Demoness G was truly someone who would do something as foolish as that. The discussions continued. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect. You mean the Demoness of the Fiend sects? That's her. I heard that the three titular disciples only gave Su Zimo half a day. If they don't see him after half a day, they'll kill Dao being Pure Maiden. If I were Su Zimo, I definitely wouldn't go. Wouldn't that be equivalent to sending myself to my death? The moment he said that, a figure flashed before him. In the blink of an eye, someone had arrived beside him. What's the surname of the Dao being Pure Maiden that you guys mentioned? Su Zimo asked. The cultivator focused his gaze and saw that the person was dressed in green robes. His eyes were clear and he was handsome. Although he was only at the nascent soul realm, his tone was impolite. That person sneered and rolled his eyes, pursing his lips. Who do you think you are? Why should I tell you? All of a sudden, the person felt his body lighten as Su Zimo grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he said frostily, "Let me ask you again, what's the surname of Dao being Pure Maiden? If you don't tell me, I'll crush your throat." Eee. The person's throat was gripped and he could not exert any strength at all. His face flushed red as he glared at Su Zimo fiercely with a ferocious glint in his eyes. However, he gritted his teeth and remained silent. This person looks familiar, he seems to be Su Zimo. It's Su Zimo. Suddenly, an exclamation sounded from the crowd. Many cultivators had witnessed the two battles in the Dao inheritance ground and naturally recognized Su Zimo. Initially, the cultivator wanted to launch a spirit consciousness attack to kill this person. However, he was scared out of his wits when he heard the words, Su Zimo. I'll speak. The person tried his best to open his mouth and a few words popped out from the depths of his throat. I heard her surname is Jiel. Su Zimo continued asking, where are they? The person straightened his arm and pointed in a direction. Su Zimo tossed the person onto the ground and sped in that direction in a flash. There was no hesitation at all within Su Zimo when he heard that Demoness G was in danger. Even though he knew that the three titular disciples were waiting for him and it was a doomed trip, he had to do it. In reality, the wisest, safest and most advantageous decision for Su Zimo right now was to challenge the Three Tribulations domain. However, he knew nothing about the Three Tribulations domain, whereas Demoness G would die half a day later. Demoness G was also a titular disciple. There was a chance that Dao being Zephyr Thunder and the others would be wary of killing her because of that fact. However, Su Zimo did not dare to take the gamble. Even if there was a mountain of blades, a sea of flames, the gates of hell and the Yellow Springs Road in front of him, he had to charge forward head-on. For his sake, Demoness G risked tremendous danger to enter the Dao inheritance ground. No matter what, he had to ensure her safety without hesitation. If Su Zimo was afraid and did not dare to advance for the sake of his Dao, he would not be Su Zimo anymore. Hurry, follow him. There's definitely going to be an unparalleled battle. This time round, there's going to be an end to all the grudges. Many cultivators howled excitedly and followed behind Su Zimo, sprinting in his direction. Su Zimo's has gone over. In order to save the Pure Maiden of the Fiend sex, Su Zimo is going to fight against three titular disciples. As news spread one after another, more and more cultivators gathered over in a massive manner. Chapter 1002. A Chance. Chapter 1002. A Chance. Su Zimo was as fast as lightning as the wind howled in his ears. His black hair danced and killing intent surged in his eyes. Suddenly, he pulled out a jar of strong wine from his storage bag. As a scholar, he was not one who enjoyed drinking. His older brother, Su Hong, was a soldier who fought on the battlefield and loved strong wine the most. Therefore, He always kept a few jars of wine in his storage bag. At that moment, for some reason, he suddenly wanted to drink a jar of wine. Slapping open the mud seal, the fragrance of wine filled the air. Su Zimo picked up the wine jar and gulped it down. Some wine spilled from the corner of his mouth onto his chest, but he did not notice it. The fiery wine slid down his throat and into his stomach, turning into a scorching aura that surged through his body. Ha 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 ha! Su Zimo raised his head and laughed, throwing down the wine jar casually. Drunk, he shouted, "Good, good! Titular disciples? Diin? Let the battle begin." Su Zimo was filled with pride and his eyes lit up as he strode forward. Although the cold wind blew against his face, the blood in his body burned hotter. Before long, it was pitch black ahead. There were countless cultivators gathered there. Su Zimo flew through the air and looked down from above. He could see that in the middle of the crowd was a huge empty space that was sufficiently spacious. On the empty ground, there was a stone statue of a female cultivator. She had a slim figure, sharp shoulders and a slender waist. Her brows were raised and she had a fairy-like appearance. Although it was only a stone statue, it was extremely lifelike with ripples beneath its feet, as though it was treading on the waves. It was graceful and elegant like a swimming dragon. It could be said to be peerless in terms of elegance. That stone statue was clearly an inheritance left behind by a mighty figure of an immortal sect. Beneath the stone statue stood a cultivator in a dark golden Taoist robe. With one hand behind his back, he looked elegant and handsome with eyes that resembled stars as he gazed at the fairy stone statue with an infatuated expression. I really don't know what sort of a figure she was. To think that a mere legacy stone statue of hers would possess such grace. The cultivator murmured softly, "It's truly a great regret to not be able to live in the same lifetime as such a fine woman." Su Zimo's gaze landed on the man's sleeves. It was the symbol of Heavenly Dipper sect. Tao being Heavenly Dipper. Su Zimo's gaze shifted. Opposite the person was a gigantic, smooth green stone. A monk in plain robes was sitting on it with his eyes half closed and his brows lowered. He held a wooden fish in his left hand and a wooden mallet in his right as he knocked repeatedly. Monk formless. There were two people standing between the two titular disciples. At the front was a girl in pink who was bound by a rope as thick as a finger. Her beautiful figure was perfectly outlined and she exuded a charming aura. The girl was beautiful and flawless. However, at that moment, the girl's eyes were watery and she looked like she was about to cry. The tears on her face had yet to dry and it made one feel pity for her. Demoness G. Su Zimo recognized her right away. Behind Demoness G stood another cultivator. He was tall and had a Dao crown on his head. Lightning crackled around his body and he had a dignified expression. Dao being Zephyr Thunder. All three of them were present. Hurry, look. Su Zimo is here. That man truly doesn't want his life anymore. To think that he would dare to come for the challenge. Could he have something going on with that pure maiden of the fiend sects? That's hard to say. Who knows, the #1 monster incarnate in history might even be a servant of the pure maiden of the fiend sects, haha. Many cultivators in the crowd giggled softly. Zimo, leave quickly. Don't bother about me. Demoness G shouted with an anxious expression. Dao being Zephyr Thunder appeared from behind Demoness G and said indifferently, since he's already here he can't leave. Dao being Heavenly Dipper, who was initially looking up at the fairy stone statue, turned around slightly and looked at Su Zimo who was in midair. His eyes shone with a bedazzling starlight. Greetings, #1 Perfected Lord. Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled faintly. In the Dao inheritance ground, demons could not use their methods. However, Su Zimo had been cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness for a long time and his eyesight was strong. That was something that could not be changed. The starlight in Dao being Heavenly Dipper's eyes did not affect him at all. Even so, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he felt immense pressure. He was almost certain that Dao being Heavenly Dipper knew visual techniques. This was a simple test. If he could not even withstand such a test, Dao being Heavenly Dipper would have attacked long ago and killed him here. On the gigantic green stone, Monk Formless raised his head slowly and looked toward Su Zimo. Patron Su, I've heard a lot about you. Nice to meet you. Monk Formless' voice was calm and gentle. There was no hint of contention or killing intent. However, every single word contained a unique rhythm that made one uneasy and their blood chi chaotic. It was extremely terrifying. Although Su Zimo could not circulate his blood chi, Monk Formless' method of testing had almost no effect on him at all. He descended slowly on the empty ground expressionlessly. What an eye-opener! Su Zimo sneered coldly. So, the methods of titular disciples of the immortal and Buddhist sects are that despicable. He was not the only one who thought that way. Most of the cultivators present had the same thought. Each of the 3 titular disciples was a renowned existence in the cultivation world. To think that they would resort to kidnapping the pure maiden of the fiend sex in order to kill a nascent soul-perfected lord. No matter how one looked at it, they were rather underhanded. Tao being Zephyr Thunder and Tao being Heavenly Dipper were speechless. Monk Formless shook his head. Patron Su, you're wrong. Since ancient times, immortals and fiends have never coexisted. As someone from the orthodox sects, it's only right for Patron Zephyr Thunder to slay demons and capture demonesses. How is that despicable? Slay demons? You lured me here to slay a demon, right? Su Zimo asked with a mocking expression. Monk Formless replied, Patron Su, you're quite an understanding person. If you're willing to lay down your butcher's knife and convert to Buddhism, I can spare your life. Master, you have a glib tongue. I wonder how strong your capabilities are. Su Zimo sneered and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. Patron Su, feel free to try. Monk Formless looked calm and aloof, but his words were sharp and unyielding. Retrieving Heaven Splitter from his storage bag, Su Zimo looked at Tao being Zephyr Thunder and said in a deep voice, Release her and I'll accede to the end. Release her. Tao being Zephyr Thunder shook his head and said indifferently, You're not qualified to negotiate with us right now. Tao being Heavenly Dipper stood where he was and Monk Formless sat upright on the green stone without moving, watching everything calmly. Zimo, don't bother about me. Leave quickly. Demoness G begged with tears streaming down her face. How about this? I'll give you a chance. A hint of mockery flashed through Tao being Zephyr Thunder's eyes as he said with a fake smile, I'm standing right here. If you can rescue her from my hands, I'll give that to you. For real. Su Zimo focused his gaze. With so many cultivators present, I naturally won't go back on my words, Tao being Zephyr Thunder said indifferently. All right. Carrying Heaven Splitter, Su Zimo walked towards Tao being Zephyr Thunder slowly. The battle was about to begin. At that moment, the surrounding cultivators turned nervous. Almost no one noticed that Tao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless did not seem nervous. Instead, there was a strange look in their eyes as though they were anticipating something. Chapter 1003, Real and Fake Demoness. Chapter 1003, Real and Fake Demoness. The positions of the 3 titular disciples were extremely particular. It was a triangular setup. When Su Zimo headed towards Tao being Zephyr Thunder, he was already inevitably surrounded by the 3 of them. As the distance between them shrank, the pressure on Su Zimo increased as well. Even back in Myriad Phenomenon City, he did not feel the same way when he faced the God and Rakshasa race. At that moment, his spirit perception was no longer of much use. That was because it was clear that the 3 titular disciples wanted to surround and kill him. Even if his spirit perception warned him repeatedly, he had to barge in to save Demoness G. However, for some reason, Su Zimo still felt that something was amiss. Therefore, he walked at an extremely slow speed with Heaven Splitter in his hands. He stared at Tao being Zephyr Thunder while pondering over what the issue was. Su Zimo and Tao being Zephyr Thunder were getting closer. 30 feet. 20 feet. Before long, they were less than 10 feet apart. At that distance, Su Zimo suddenly paused. His gaze landed on Demoness G's face. He finally understood what was wrong. It was not Tao being Zephyr Thunder, Tao being Heavenly Dipper or Monk Formless. It was Demoness G. Her peerlessly beautiful face, alluring figure and even her charming voice were identical to Demoness G's. However, the person before him did not possess Demoness G's charm that could bewitch everyone. Demoness G was born with a natural charm and was not pretentious at all. Every single word, action and smile of hers was enough to bewitch all living beings. However, the charm of the person was only limited to her appearance. She was way inferior compared to Demoness G. More importantly, the warning from his spirit perception felt familiar. This was the feeling that appeared every time an assassin from Hidden Death Sect was about to strike. The identity of the person before him was clear. The assassin of Hidden Death Sect could change his appearance and disguise himself to confuse others. However, no matter what, he had not cultivated the secret skills of Pure Maiden Sect and could not carry forth the charm of the Pure Maiden of the Fiend Sects completely. He could only imitate in form and not in spirit. Of course, even so, he almost fooled Su Zimo. If the person in front of Su Zimo was a titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect, it would mean that the four of them were ganging up on him. Zimo, watch out. She's fake. Suddenly, a cry sounded from the crowd. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he no longer had any doubts. Hidden Death, you're courting death. Su Zimo roared and slashed with his backhand, releasing the countercurrent saber intent towards the Demoness G before him. A look of panic flashed through the eyes of this Demoness Jeeve. He had not expected that his plan would fail at the final moment. His true identity was the titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect. Before long, Dao being Hidden Death calmed down. No matter what, Su Zimo had already fallen into their encirclement. Even though he failed in his assassination attempt, the latter would not be able to escape death. Dao being Hidden Death laughed tenderly. Zimo, how can you bear to attack me? Swash! In a flash, his figure swerved to the side and disappeared in front of everyone. Hidden Death Sect specialized in concealment and assassination. Now that his identity was exposed, there was no way he would choose to go head-on against Su Zimo, and his figure disappeared without a trace. This was also the most terrifying aspect of Hidden Death Sect. Disappearing was not equivalent to leaving. Rather, no one knew if he had left or if he was still lingering around. Nobody knew when he would attack either. This would cause immense mental pressure on cultivators, and they would have to be on high alert at all times. At the very least, they would have to split half of their attention to guard against the attacks of Hidden Death Sect cultivators. The crowd burst into an uproar upon the sight of that. The Pure Maiden of the Fiend Sects earlier on was a disguise by Dao being Hidden Death? Wasn't that way too realistic? She was exactly the same as the Demoness of the Fiend Sects. The legacy disciples of Hidden Death Sect are unfathomable and no one knows their true appearances. As a titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect, his methods are even more superb. In that case, there are actually 4 titular disciples ganging up on Su Zimo. Seems like the #1 monster incarnate of history is going to be buried here today. All the cultivators believed that no one would be able to withstand the combined attack of 4 titular disciples. Even Dean, who was the most famous now, would not be able to do it. The battlefield was ever-changing. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo took the initiative and Dao being Hidden Death vanished, leaving only Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Su Zimo facing one another. Crackle! Unknowingly, a gigantic hammer that shone with green lightning and revolved around a hurricane appeared in Dao being Zephyr Thunder's palm. Connate dermic weapon, Zephyr Thunder Hammer. Facing Su Zimo's incoming slash, Dao being Zephyr Thunder was not afraid at all. He strode forward as well and swung the Zephyr Thunder hammer against the incoming saber. All cultivators who used hammers specialized in body tempering. It was the same for Dao being Zephyr Thunder. He did not believe that Su Zimo would be able to fight against him head-on, given the difference of a major cultivation realm between them coupled with the fact that the latter's blood chi was suppressed. Boom! Sparks flew everywhere as the saber and hammer collided. Dao being Zephyr Thunder's body shuddered as he felt a terrifying power surge into his body through the Zephyr Thunder hammer, as though it was trying to cut through his life force. Dermic powers surged and blood chi surged. Instantly, Dao being Zephyr Thunder suppressed that power. At the same time, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk formless attacks arrived. I heard that you also use sabers. Please guide me along. Dao being Heavenly Dipper wielded a saber that was filled with astral energy and slashed forward, scattering endless starlight as his saber intent descended. Su Zimo was fearless in a fight of saber techniques. His gaze was cold as he slashed with his backhand, slashing out layers of purgatory, engulfing the starlight that filled the skies as it descended towards Tao being Heavenly Dipper. Dong! All of a sudden, a sound that possessed a mysterious power echoed from the void and caused Su Zimo's heart to skip a beat. He paused in his actions. The purgatory saber intent that was just condensed dissipated instantly. Clang! The two sabers collided. Crushed by Tao being Heavenly Dipper's saber intent while losing his own, Su Zimo grunted and staggered backwards. He swept his gaze across. He saw Monk Formless striding over, staring at Su Zimo with a wooden fish in his left hand and a wooden mallet in his right. That strange and mysterious sound earlier on was the sound of Monk Formless striking the wooden fish. This was also a sound domain secret skill. However, this sound domain secret skill was even more terrifying. It could be released repeatedly with the help of a dermic weapon. Crack! Lightning flashed before his eyes. Tao being Zephyr Thunder charged forward once more and swung his gigantic Zephyr Thunder hammer towards Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo gripped Heaven Splitter tightly and released the Purgatory Saber intent once more. Blood chi filled the air as it swept towards Tao being Zephyr Thunder. Dong! The sound of the wooden fish rang. Su Zimo shuddered and the Purgatory Saber intent dissipated once more. Clang! At the same time, the Zephyr Thunderhammer and Heaven Splitter collided with an ear-piercing sound. Affected by the sound of the wooden fish, Su Zimo's strength decreased and he was almost sent flying by Tao being Zephyr Thunder's hammer strike. Starlight scattered. Tao being Heavenly Dipper struck once more. Monk Formless extended his wooden mallet and struck towards Su Zimo's head as well. The three titular disciples joined forces and did not give Su Zimo any chance to catch his breath at all. It was as though they had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding of one another, unleashing a torrential storm of attacks. Instantly, Su Zimo fell into an unprecedented danger. Chapter 1004. 5 Titular Disciples. Chapter 1004. 5 Titular Disciples. Against the combined forces of the 3 titular disciples, Su Zimo's chest surged with pride with the help of his intoxication. He roared into the skies and gripped Heaven Splitter tightly before slashing forward. Not only did that slash unleash countercurrent, it even released the Purgatory Saber intent. The 2 great saber intents actually showed signs of fusing and engulfed Tao being Zephyr Thunder, Tao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless. That man is truly ferocious. He can even fight back against the combined forces of 3 titular disciples. That's the #1 perfected lord for you. Yi Tiancheng, perfected Lord Panglan and the others did not die in vain. No wonder Di Yin chose this place as his battlefield. What would things be like if this was outside and that man could make use of his blood chi? The cultivators expressed shock on their faces as the thought crossed their mind. Stars encirclement of the moon. Tao being Heavenly Dipper waved the long saber in his hands and a gigantic starry sky appeared above the 4 of them. Countless stars shone brightly as though endless starlight was scattered right before their eyes. All the stars had appeared. As for the moon that was encircled, it was the saber slash produced by Tao being Heavenly Dipper. The slash formed a perfect arc in midair, crushing towards Su Zimo like a crescent moon. Starlight filled the skies and the crescent moon shone even brighter with a cold killing intent. That saber intent was truly shocking. It was definitely not weaker than the Sea Calming Manual and Asura Saber. Tempest Hammer. Tao being Zephyr Thunder hollered and his dermic hammer rumbled like thunder. A series of hurricanes appeared on his dermic hammer with a terrifying might that swept towards Su Zimo. The hurricanes howled and before they arrived, Su Zimo's cheeks were already hurting. This was not even a true killing move. The body of the Zephyr Thunderhammer was completely hidden within the hurricanes. Be it through the naked eye or spirit consciousness, there was no trace of the Zephyr Thunderhammer at all. However, Su Zimo was clear that the connate dermic weapon was already flying towards him. If he could not find the true body of the Zephyr Thunderhammer, no matter how strong his body was, his tendons and bones would be broken from the impact. This was the terror of a titular disciple. Su Zimo might not be able to secure victory even against any one of them. Right now, the combined attack from 2 of them made him feel suffocated. Dong. At the same time, Monk Formless looked at Su Zimo with a fake smile and knocked down the wooden fish in his hands once more. All three titular disciples were top-tier void reversions. Be it in terms of combat talent or experience, nobody could compare to them. Even though the three of them had never worked together before, their coordination was flawless. If Su Zimo was affected by the sound of the wooden fish, the saber intent in his hands would disperse and he would be drowned by the two killing moves, Star's Encirclement of the Moon and Tempest Hammer, and die without a burial place. Su Zimo had noticed Monk Formless' actions long ago. The moment the wooden mallet in his hands descended, he took a deep breath. Kill! Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a thunderous roar. Thunderclap kill. Although this sound domain secret skill did not have any dermic weapons to augment it, it could minimize the impact of the wooden fish sound on him. Su Zimo's saber intent was formed. Bang! Boom! Boom! A gigantic purgatory descended, separating the stars from the crescent moon. In the river of blood, many skeletons stood up and charged towards the crescent moon. Crack! 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 The two saber intents, Star's Encirclement of the Moon and Purgatory, collided repeatedly with a terrifying might. At the same time, the hurricanes descended. The Zephyr Thunderhammer was hidden within the hurricanes, but Su Zimo could not see it at all. Su Zimo made up his mind and closed his eyes, completely relying on his spirit perception to capture the fleeting sensation. Time seemed to have slowed down. It was as though everything in the surrounding had stopped. While it seemed like 10,000 years had passed, in reality, everything was happening in the blink of an eye. Without warning, Su Zimo suddenly slashed upwards against the currents, breaking through the layers of hurricanes to find the true body of the Zephyr Thunderhammer hidden within. Clang! The saber and hammer collided with a loud bang. Both Su Zimo and Dao being Zephyr Thunder shuddered. A look of disbelief flashed through Dao being Zephyr Thunder's eyes. To think that despite the encirclement of three titular disciples, the nascent soul before him could still defend against their combined attacks. The three of them did not know the tremendous pressure that came from their encirclement was also the reason why Su Zimo's potential was forced out. Right then, something weird happened. Suddenly, the ground beneath Su Zimo's feet cracked and a skinny, pale palm reached out without warning and grabbed his ankle. A bone-chilling coldness spread from his ankle into his body, threatening to freeze his meridians, blood and organs. Su Zimo was shocked internally. There's someone else. Apart from Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Monk Formless and Dao being Hidden Death, there was another person who hid underground, concealed from his senses. For Su Zimo, the attack of this person at this moment was fatal. The cold chi invaded his body and caused his strength to dissipate. The Purgatory and Countercurrent saber intent swayed and showed signs of collapsing. Boom! The ground exploded as a pitch-black figure burrowed out from the ground with a sinister bone spear in his hands. He thrust it towards the back of Su Zimo's head. Ah! The crowd burst into an uproar upon the sight of that. This person's timing was perfect. Su Zimo's entire focus and strength were on defending against Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless head-on. He had no strength left to defend against the killing move behind him. Furthermore, it was a killing blow that came without any warning. It's him. The titular disciple of Malevolent Earth sect of the Fiend sects. Another titular disciple has appeared and he's also trying to kill Su Zimo. Some cultivators recognized the black-robed cultivator and shouted. Right then, the void beside Su Zimo distorted and a figure appeared mysteriously like a ghost. The figure wielded a sword and stabbed towards Su Zimo's temple. Dao being Hidden Death had attacked as well. Instantly, all the cultivators present cried out in disbelief as shock slowly filled their widened eyes. In order to kill a nascent soul, 5 titular disciples of the cultivation world were mobilized. This was a treatment no one in history had received. Sigh, I wonder if it's his fortune or his sorrow. Some cultivators sighed in their hearts with emotional expressions. If the 5 titular disciples attacked at the same time, Su Zimo would definitely die. At that moment, many cultivators felt pity for him when they saw that. This was the injustice of fate. Without a super sect as a backing, no matter how much of a monster incarnate he was, he would still be killed and die. I believe that even if this person dies prematurely, he won't be quickly forgotten like the other paragon. A cultivator said softly, a monster incarnate like him that requires the joined forces of 5 titular disciples to kill will definitely be recorded in the books of history. Chapter 1005. Touching Words. Chapter 1005. Touching Words. Nobody could understand the feeling of being surrounded by 5 titular disciples. The pressure was suffocating, despairing, and ubiquitous. It was as though Su Zimo could sense that he was about to be torn into pieces the next moment and be destroyed in both body and spirit. He could even smell the aura of death and knew that he was falling into an endless abyss. At that moment, all his trump cards were useless. Even if he summoned the Creation Green Lotus and the Illumination Sword formation, he would not be able to resolve the situation of certain death. Starlight scattered and pierced through the purgatory. The moon-like saber sliced the entire purgatory in half and landed heavily on Heaven's Splitter. Hurricanes howled and the Tempest Hammer exploded once more, smashing against the saber. The saber and hammer descended at the same time and a terrifying power burst forth. Instantly, Su Zimo's palm was torn and blood gushed out. Unable to hold on to Heaven's Splitter, it flew out of his hands. Ever since he started cultivating, this was the first time he had his weapon knocked out. This was only the beginning. Dao being Malevolent Earthbone Spear and Dao being Hidden Death Sword had already arrived. No matter how strong Su Zimo's physique was, even if he could use his blood chi, he would not be able to defend against the sharpness of a connate Dao being Dermic weapon. In front of him, Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled faintly and raised his chin slightly, looking down with a hint of pity in his eyes. Dao being Zephyr Thunder was expressionless as his gaze landed on the storage bag on Su Zimo's waist. He had to get his hands on the Purple Thunder manual. Monk Formless had a pitiful expression as he pressed his palms together, as though he was prepared to wait for Su Zimo to die and obtain his Creation Green Lotus before sending him off through purification. At the brink of death, Su Zimo calmed down rapidly. Up till this point of the battle, his left hand had been empty and hovered around his waist the entire time. But now, his left hand suddenly gripped an unassuming jade pendant at his waist and crushed it. Piak! The jade pendant shattered and burst forth with a resplendent light. Instantly, Su Zimo was enveloped within it, forming a gigantic barrier. Boom! Dao being Malevolent Earthbone Spear and Dao being Hidden Death Sword collided against the light barrier almost at the same time with a loud bang. Instantly, Su Zimo was sent flying and fell to the side. Against the attacks of the 2 titular disciples, cracks appeared on the barrier and it dissipated quickly. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others narrowed their gazes. Protection Dermic Weapon. As titular disciples, they recognized the origin of the light barrier right away. Protection Dermic weapons that could be carried around like accessories were the most precious and rare. They were prepared by super sex or conjoint body mighty figures for those closest to them. Although it looked inconspicuous, it could save a life at a critical moment. That Protection Dermic weapon was the treasure given to him by Shangguanzi of Thousand Cranes sect. Su Zimo felt a lingering fear in his heart. If not for that Dermic weapon, he would have died earlier on. Even with his scarlet-haired spirit and many methods such as his dragonification, nothing could have helped him at that moment. Of course, even so, Su Zimo was still injured. The Protection Dermic weapon could defend against a full-powered attack from a void reversion. Although he managed to defend against the attacks of Dao being Malevolent Earth and Dao being Hidden Death, Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Dao being Heavenly Dipper's powers had already broken through his defenses and surged into his body before he summoned his Protection Dermic weapon. Su Zimo half knelt on the ground with a pale face and spat out a mouthful of blood. Zimo, are you all right? Right then, a fragrance wafted over and a pink figure appeared beside him. Su Zimo glanced sideways. The girl before him possessed an innate charm. She pursed her lips tightly and tears welled up in her eyes, filled with worry and heartache. Demoness G. The girl before him was the true Demoness G. The moment before they exchanged blows, a voice sounded from the crowd, reminding him to be careful. Su Zimo had already guessed that Demoness G was really here. Although he had fallen into the trap of the 5 titular disciples, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others did not lie to him on this matter. Fufu, ha 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 ha. Su Zimo's lips were stained with blood as he looked at the girl beside him. Suddenly, he could not help but laugh, unable to conceal the joy in his eyes. What are you laughing at? He was already surrounded by 5 titular disciples and it was impossible for him to escape. Demoness G was so worried that she was about to cry. You fool! She thumped Su Zimo on the shoulders gently and said with a sobbing tone. You've been tricked. You shouldn't have come. Apart from worry, Demoness G also felt endless self-blame. If she had appeared earlier and stopped Su Zimo before he arrived, things would not have turned out this way. It's not a bad thing either. Su Zimo smiled. At least you're safe and sound. Demoness G was stunned. The tears in her eyes could no longer be controlled and fell like crystal beads, wetting her clothes. She was a little dazed as she looked at Su Zimo's smiling face. Even though the person in front of him was deceived by the 5 titular disciples and was in a dire situation, the reason why he could still smile so happily was because she was safe. However, the price was too great. A tender look flashed through Demoness G's eyes as she whispered, "Those are the most touching words of love I've ever heard." Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 3 were relaxed and in no hurry. Even if Su Zimo managed to survive with his protection dermic weapon, he was already injured. Furthermore, Su Zimo could not escape from the 5 of them. Dao being Hidden Death's figure flickered and disappeared once more. With an expressionless face and a cold expression, Dao being Malevolent Earth looked at Demoness G and said slowly, as someone of the fiend's sex, let me remind you out of goodwill that it's best for you to stay away from him. Otherwise, if a huge battle breaks out and you die because of it, there will be no one left in your pure maiden sect. Rising slowly, Su Zimo looked at Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others with a lightning-sharp gaze. Heaven Splitter had already fallen to the side. Su Zimo's glabella shone and he summoned the creation Green Lotus. Looking at the flawless Green Lotus platform that was spinning slowly in midair, Monk Formless eyes rippled. Holding the creation Green Lotus in his left hand, Su Zimo sent a voice transmission to Demoness G. Leave this place first. The 5 of them won't be able to trap me. If he was in Tianhuang mainland, the 5 titular disciples would not be able to trap him indeed. As long as he released Blood Escape, even Dharma characteristic Dao lords might not be able to catch up to him. However, this was the Dao inheritance ground and his Blood Escape technique could not be activated. The reason why he said that was because he wanted Demoness G to leave this place and escape from the dangers. For real. Demoness G's heart skipped a beat as hope shone in her eyes. She knew Su Zimo's capabilities and it was not impossible for him to escape the pursuit of 5 titular disciples. Hurry and go. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission, as long as you leave, I'll be able to fight with my full strength and retreat at any time. If I want to leave, who can stop me? All right. Demoness G believed him and grit her teeth, wiping away the tears on her face before turning to leave. Chapter 1006, Malevolent Earthblood. Chapter 1006. Malevolent Earthblood. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 5 titular disciples did not stop Demoness G from leaving. It was better to have less trouble. Furthermore, Demoness G was someone of the fiend sex and there were already 2 of them among the 5 titular disciples. There was no need for them to make enemies. Their only goal was to kill Su Zimo and split his treasures. That's enough. Dao being Heavenly Dipper clapped and smiled. The beauty has left and you can die now. Ha ha. Su Zimo grinned and his eyes shone with a ferocious glint as he said coldly, I'm not a match for the 5 of you together. However, it's not impossible for me to drag one of you down with me before I die. Phoo. Dao being Heavenly Dipper shook his head and chuckled. Su Zimo, you're too naive. If you had advanced to the Void Reversion Realm, you might have had the right to say that. But now you're far from it. Stop wasting our breath on him. Dao being Malevolent Earth said, the commotion here is so huge that Dean might be rushing over. At that time, we'll have to split a portion of his treasures. At the mention of Dean, a hint of fear flashed through the eyes of the other 4. Compared to the four of them, Dean could only be considered as a rising newcomer. However, in recent years, he was already showing signs of surpassing them. At the very least, none of them were willing to go against Dean. The four of them spread out and headed towards Successive, gradually forming an encirclement. Once the four of them surrounded him, Successive would be attacked from both sides. At that thought, Successive's body swayed and he was the first to attack, charging towards Dao being Malevolent Earth at the side. Oh! Dao being Malevolent Earth's gaze turned cold as he sneered. To think that I would be the first to be attacked. Do you think I'm the easiest to provoke? Shoo! 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 He waved his bone spear and conjured a series of spear shadows in midair. The air was filled with a malevolent aura that was as black as ink. One after another, malevolent ghost faces appeared in midair and lunged towards Successive. Dong! Monk Formless lowered his gaze and knocked on the wooden fish once more. OM! Successive chanted Sanskrit to dispel the dermic sound of the wooden fish while he conjured a seal with his right hand and released the fiend suppression seal at the same time. Boom! In the firmaments, a gigantic golden palm appeared and crushed down towards Dao being Malevolent Earth. The fiend suppression seal was the most effective against fiend cultivators. When Monk Formless saw that the sound of his wooden fish was useless against Successive, he swung the wooden mallet in his hands and it expanded rapidly, smashing towards the latter's head. Clear your mind. Monk Formless chided softly. Heaven Splitter had already been sent flying by the collision earlier on, and its connection was lost. Successive did not dare to release the creation Green Lotus and kept it in his palm. When he saw the mallet coming at him, Successive raised the creation Green Lotus with a reverse grip. It let out rays of resplendent light, colliding against the mallet. Swash! Dao being Heavenly Dipper arrived beside Successive and with a flick of his wrist, his saber slashed down. Accompanied by endless starlight, astral chi filled the air in a terrifying manner. Ooh! Hurricanes howled. Dao being Zephyr Thunder swung his Zephyr Thunder hammer and smashed down on Successive's head with gusts of hurricanes. The moment Successive released the fiend suppression seal with his right hand, he slapped his storage bag and pulled out a dark gray mountain before tossing it behind him. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. The Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded against the wind and shielded Successive from the back, exuding a powerful suction force. The suction force did not affect Dao being Malevolent Earth's bone spear or Monk Formless wooden fish at all. However, it had a huge impact on Dao being Heavenly Dipper's saber and Dao being Zephyr Thunder's Zephyr Thunder hammer. That was also the reason why Successive attacked Dao being Malevolent Earth and Monk Formless right away. In order to survive in this situation, he had to expand his advantage to the extreme without any mistakes. Swoosh! The suction force of the Mystic Magnet Mountain was immense. Dao being Heavenly Dipper frowned. Although he gripped the saber in his hands tightly with immense strength, the saber still deviated from its original trajectory uncontrollably. The saber intent could no longer be condensed and dissipated quickly. On the other side, Dao being Zephyr Thunder's situation was similar as well. His charge was extremely ferocious. In the end, he was pulled by the Mystic Magnet Mountain and could not hold himself back. The Zephyr Thunder hammer carried his body and smashed into the Mystic Magnet Mountain. Boom! Dao being Zephyr Thunder's body shuddered and his mind buzzed from the shock. Even his teeth were starting to loosen. Although he was not injured from that blow, he felt extremely terrible. Dao being Heavenly Dipper frowned. He controlled his saber and tried his best to prevent it from being sucked towards the Mystic Magnet Mountain. However, he was of no threat to Successive if this stalemate continued. That was the power of the unique treasures. They could play an extremely miraculous role at critical moments. At the same time, a direct clash had already erupted. In midair, the golden palm collided with the Dao being Malevolent Earth's bone spear and a huge hole was created. The palm was also corroded by the Malevolent Earth chi. However, Dao being Malevolent Earth had expended a lot of energy in this fight as well. On the other side, the creation Green Lotus collided with the mallet. The Green Lotus emitted an incomparable glow as though it was the most beautiful treasure in the world. Ugh! Monk Formless grunted and retreated. Although he was at the Void Reversion Realm, he was still at a disadvantage in melee combat against Su Zimo, who was wielding the creation Green Lotus. Dao being Malevolent Earth's figure flashed and he circled behind Su Zimo. Suddenly, he took out a pitch-black gourd from his storage bag and opened the cork, tossing the black gourd into the air. Swoosh! Endless fresh blood spilled from the black gourd. The blood had already turned black and gave off a foul stench. It was as though there were countless vengeful spirits and evil ghosts howling. The black blood splattered on the mystic magnet mountain. Buzz! Buzz! Black smoke billowed from the mystic magnet mountain as though it was corroded. The light of the mystic magnet mountain dimmed rapidly. Malevolent earth blood. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he had browsed through countless ancient books. There were records of the malevolent earth blood. The malevolent earth blood required the blood of young ladies to be brewed and infused with malevolent earth chi. Thereafter, the young ladies would be killed and their souls would be infused within. It was extremely savage. The more dead souls there were, the more powerful the malevolent earth blood would be. Malevolent earth blood was specifically used to destroy dermic weapons. Legend has it that a fiend of the fiend's sex once refined malevolent earth blood so strong that a single drop was enough to cripple a dermic treasure. Although the malevolent earth blood before him was not at that level, it caused the mystic magnet mountain to be soiled with endless tainted souls and temporarily lose the power of magnetism. You're knowledgeable, I'll give that to you. Dao being malevolent earth harumphed coldly. I was long prepared to deal with you. His malevolent earth blood was meant to counter Su Zimo's mystic magnet mountain. With the mystic magnet mountain damaged, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder were relieved instantly and attacked Su Zimo at the same time. At the same time, Monk Formless and Malevolent Earth Dao being attacked once more. Instantly, things changed on the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was already surrounded by 4 titular disciples and was in a perilous situation. In an invisible corner, there was even an extremely terrifying assassin hiding. He had retracted his killing intent and was waiting for an opportunity to strike. It was fine if he did not attack. Once he did, it would definitely be a killing blow. Chapter 1007, Nightmare. Chapter 1007, Nightmare. The saber beam descended. At the same time Dao being Heavenly Dipper released his terrifying saber intent, he clenched his left hand into a fist and released his sex secret skill, hollering softly, Heavenly Dipper Fist. Stars suddenly appeared in the firmaments and spun slowly, scattering down streams of starlight that gathered on Dao being Heavenly Dipper's fist. Dao being Heavenly Dipper's fist seemed to have transformed into a gigantic star. His saber intent and secret skill descended at the same time. Dao being Heavenly Dipper did not wish to delay any longer, and had already used his full strength. Get lost! Su Zimo's eyes shone with a cold glint as he used his fingers like a sword and slashed in the direction of Dao being Heavenly Dipper. Chi! A bedazzling sword beam burst forth, creating a vast expanse of white. When the heaven's killing intent is released, the stars are shifted out of alignment. The power released by the sword chi caused the constellations in the skies to turn into a mess. They collided and fell one after another. The Heavenly Dipper fist was broken by the heaven-slaying sword art halfway through. Dao being Heavenly Dipper's expression changed. As a titular disciple, he could naturally sense the power of the sword art. The saber intent collided with it. It was completely silent. His saber intent was sliced into 2 by the white sword chi and dissipated instantly. Dao being Heavenly Dipper burst forth with his blood chi and dermic powers surged within him as he wielded his saber with both hands and slashed at the incoming sword chi. Clang! The sword chi collided with the saber and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The sword chi finally dissipated. As for Dao being Heavenly Dipper, he retreated a step back with a hint of fear in his eyes. That sword chi was way too terrifying. It broke through his saber intent, secret skill and collided head-on with his physical body and blood chi before dissipating. If Su Zimo were to advance to the Void Reversion Realm, the might of the sword chi would increase by several folds. At that time, no one would dare to take it head-on. Just as Su Zimo released the heaven-slaying sword art and forced Dao being Heavenly Dipper to retreat, the shadow of a hammer hovered in the air and howled. Su Zimo's eyes flashed with lightning as he conjured hand seals repeatedly. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the skies. Dark clouds pressed down like lead. Purple thunderstorm. Su Zimo pointed in Dao being Zephyr Thunder's direction. Streaks of purple thunderbolt rained down from the dark clouds, connecting the firmaments to the earth. They weaved endlessly to form a terrifying purple thunderstorm. The thunderstorm engulfed Dao being Zephyr Thunder instantly. This was supposed to be a supreme cultivation technique of our Zephyr Thunder Palace. Dao being Zephyr Thunder was enraged as streaks of green lightning burst forth from his body. Waving his hammer, he howled in the purple thunderstorm. An evil wind blew behind him. A dense cluster of flying swords the size of steel needles appeared in Su Zimo's right eye. Turning around, he looked towards Dao being Malevolent Earth. Shoo! 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 36 flying swords tore through the air, leaving streaks of sword chi in midair. They formed the Illumination Sword formation and collided against the incoming bone spear. Boom! With a loud bang, the sword formation dissipated and the 36 flying swords returned to Su Zimo's right eye. Monk Formless Mallet descended. Su Zimo lifted the creation Green Lotus and welcomed it. At the same time, a phantom-like figure suddenly appeared behind him and stabbed at the back of his head. Dao being Hidden Death attacked. Su Zimo supported the lotus with his left hand. While defending against Monk Formless, he twisted his body and reached out with his right hand to grab the sword behind him. Boom! The creation Green Lotus blocked the mallet once more. With his right hand, Su Zimo grabbed the sword in his palm. You must have a death wish. Dao being Hidden Death's sword spun and sliced the flesh on Su Zimo's right hand. However, the sword could not cut further beyond the flesh. The divine phoenix bone. Even the Dharma treasures of conjoint bodies might not be able to damage it, let alone a connate Dao being dermic weapon. Su Zimo's right hand coiled, trembled and pulled. The killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness burst forth. Dao being Hidden Death could not hold on to his sword and it was pulled over by Su Zimo's right hand. The crowd burst into an uproar upon the sight of that. Against the ferocious attacks of the 5 titular disciples, Su Zimo could still retaliate and snatch Dao being Hidden Death's weapon with his bare hands. Earth Malevolent Finger. Dao being Malevolent Earth released his sex secret skill and a finger formed from black chi. It was shrouded in a malevolent aura and charged towards Su Zimo. A ferocious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He did not dodge or avoid the malevolent earth finger and instead used the sword like a saber. With a backhand slash, he cut towards Dao being Hidden Death who had yet to retreat. This was a gamble with his life. He wanted to kill Dao being Hidden Death even if he had to risk being struck by the malevolent earth finger. A flash of blood appeared. Dao being Hidden Death shrieked and retreated rapidly. A wound appeared on his body and he disappeared into the void once more. A look of pity flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. In the end, he was still lacking. Dao being Hidden Death was a titular disciple after all. Even though his combat strength was inferior to other titular disciples, his escape methods were not inferior at all. At the same time, the malevolent earth finger struck Su Zimo's chest heavily and sent him flying. The 5 titular disciples did not give Su Zimo any breathing room at all. If it was during normal times, he would be able to gain the upper hand with every single one of his trump cards and even find an opportunity to kill his opponents. But now, when he released his dermic arts, sword and visual techniques, he could only defend forcibly. In the end, he was still injured by the malevolent earth finger. Although he was wearing the perfect grade dermic weapon inner armor, it could not completely block out the power of the malevolent earth finger. Quite a bit of remnant power surged into his body and his organs were severely shaken. Su Zimo held the sword that he snatched from Dao being Hidden Death with his right hand and pushed against the ground. He spat out another mouthful of blood and his face turned paler. In just 2 rounds, he had exhausted all his trump cards. As for the 5 titular disciples, they were almost unaffected. Dao being Hidden Death was the only one injured by his sword and it wasn't even a fatal attack. Even if Dao being Hidden Death did not attack, Su Zimo would definitely die if Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 4 titular disciples were to launch another wave of attacks. Su Zimo, you've lost. Dao being Heavenly Dipper looked at Su Zimo without any pity. Dao being Zephyr Thunder said indifferently, "It's a worthy death for you to be killed by the combined efforts of 5 of us titular disciples." Sigh. Monk Formless sighed gently. "Patron Su, I've given you a chance. Unfortunately, you didn't take it." Although the 4 titular disciples seemed to be lamenting, there was a sense of superiority in their words. Su Zimo's black hair fluttered and his face was pale. The blood at the corner of his mouth was not dried and he looked like he was in an extremely terrible condition. However, his eyes were still bright and clear. Foo-foo. Su Zimo chuckled. "Aren't you smug? The 5 of you titular disciples sure feel proud that you have to join forces to kill a nascent soul in the Dao inheritance ground." The smile on Dao being Heavenly Dipper's face gradually disappeared. The expressions of Dao being Zephyr Thunder and the others darkened as well. Pointing at Monk Formless and the other 3, Su Zimo laughed maniacally. "Even the 5 of you are befitting to be titular disciples? How laughable! How ridiculous! Even though you guys have the upper hand right now, you guys are filled with fear and dread internally. You're afraid of me escaping and growing further. As long as I'm alive, I'll always be a nightmare for the 5 of you." Su Zimo's words struck right to the core and were even more terrifying than divine weapons. The Dao hearts of the 5 of them wavered. "Kill him!" Unable to hold it in any longer, Dao being Malevolent Earth leaped up and charged towards Su Zimo. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.